12-year-old Noah Mercer was tracking a desert fox through the blistering heat of Red Rock Canyon when his German shepherd, Kodiak, froze mid-step. The dog's ears pinned back, and he released a low, bone-chilling howl that shattered the desert silence. Noah rushed to the cliff's edge and found a nightmare, a woman clinging to a driftwood log in the churning river below, her grip failing with every surge of the current. But as Noah scrambled down the rocks to save her, he noticed something wasn't right. Her panic seemed too controlled, and the way she watched him wasn't with gratitude, but with calculation. As Noah extended his hand into the void, he had no idea he was reaching toward the person sent to destroy the only home he had left. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit subscribe it, you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story, because tomorrow, I have another beautiful story to share with you, and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Now let's get into the story. The Arizona desert stretched like cracked gold beneath a merciless sun, shimmering with heat waves that distorted the horizon. Noah Mercer, all gangly 12-year-old limbs and sun-bleached hair, moved through the canyon with the careful confidence of a boy who had learned the wilderness from a mother he buried 2 years ago. He wore her faded red plaid shirt over his tee, a size too big, flapping in the dry wind. For Noah, the canyon wasn't just land, it was the only family he had left besides his father. The isolation of homeschooling had made him quiet, an old soul in a young body, with hazel eyes that carried a grief far too heavy for a child. But out here, among the red stone and sagebrush, the silence made sense. Beside him, Kodiak, a 3-year-old German shepherd with rich copper and black fur and eyes like molten amber, shadowed his every step. Kodiak wasn't just a pet. He was the final gift from Noah's mother, a protector with instincts that cut through human pretense. The dog's left ear, notched from a fight with a coyote, swiveled constantly, tuning into frequencies Noah couldn't hear. They moved as one unit, an unspoken pact of loyalty stitched together by loss. Noah paused to wipe sweat from his forehead, checking his footing on the sandstone. He expected nothing more than the call of a hawk or the scuttle of a lizard. But then, Kodiak stopped dead. The hair along the dog's spine stood up like wire. He didn't bark. He let out a guttural sound deep in his chest, the specific growl that meant danger. Noah knelt. "What is it, boy?" Kodiak bolted. He didn't run toward the trail but toward the drop-off, where the canyon floor gave way to the rushing river below. Noah scrambled after him, his boots sliding on loose shale, heart hammering against his ribs. When he reached the ledge, he saw her. 30 feet down, caught in the violent eddy of the river, a woman was barely holding onto a fallen tree trunk wedged between two boulders. She was soaked, dark hair plastered to her face, eyes wide and darting. She looked about 38, dressed in rugged clothes that looked surprisingly new. "Help!" she screamed, her voice cracking over the roar of the water. "I can't hold on." Noah didn't think. He grabbed the climbing rope from his pack, anchoring it to a sturdy mesquite tree. "Kodiak, stay," he commanded, his voice trembling but firm. He rappelled down the jagged face of the rock, the muscles in his arms burning. When he got close enough, he extended a hand. The woman reached out, her fingers icy despite the heat of the day. As he hauled her up onto the dry shelf of rock, she collapsed, coughing up water, clutching a waterproof bag to her chest like it was gold. I'm Claire," she stammered, shivering violently. "I'm a photographer. I was trying to get a shot of the rapids and I slipped. I got lost. I didn't mean to come this far." Her voice shook, but as Noah looked at her, he felt a strange prickle on the back of his neck. She didn't look like the tourists who usually got lost here. She looked sharp, calculated. "You're okay now," Noah said, wanting to believe her, desperate to be the hero his mother would have been. "My dad and we'll help you." But from the top of the cliff, Kodiak didn't whine in sympathy. He stared down at Claire with unblinking amber eyes, and let out a low, menacing growl. The dog knew what the boy didn't. The storm had just begun. The morning sun didn't rise over the Mercer Ranch, it ignited it. First came the bruising purple of the pre-dawn sky, heavy and cool, pressing down on the expanse of the high desert. Then, as if a switch had been thrown deep within the earth, the horizon caught fire. The light spilled over the jagged teeth of the eastern ridge, turning the sandstone cliffs from gray to a violent, impossible red. It was a landscape of broken earth and open sky, a place where the geology was so loud it drowned out human noise. 12-year-old Noah Mercer was awake before the light hit his window. In the 2 years since his mother died, sleep had become a thin, fragile thing, easily torn by the sound of the wind or the settling of the old house's timber bones. He lay still for a moment, listening. The silence of the ranch was heavy, a physical weight that filled the hallway and the kitchen and the empty side of his father's bed. It wasn't the peaceful silence of rest. It was the holding breath silence of waiting for something that wasn't coming back. Noah pushed the quilt aside and swung his legs out of bed. His feet hit the hardwood floor, the boards cool and smooth, worn down by 3 generations of Mercer boots. He dressed in the dark, pulling on a pair of jeans that were ending a little too high above his ankles. He was growing too fast, his limbs lengthening into a gangly, wire-thin frame that he hadn't quite learned to control yet. He reached for the shirt draped over the back of his chair. It was a faded red plaid flannel, soft as water from years of washing. It had been his mother's. The sleeves were rolled up 3 times to fit his arms, and even after 2 years, if he buried his nose in the fabric and closed his eyes tight enough to see stars, he could almost smell the faint trace of vanilla and sage that used to follow her through the rooms like a ghost. He buttoned it to his chin, an armor against the day. Downstairs, the kitchen was gray and still. Noah moved through the routine with the muscle memory of a much older man. Coffee grounds into the filter, 3 scoops, not 2, because his father's eyes had been red-rimmed and hollow for weeks. Water from the tap, smelling slightly of the iron pipes and the deep aquifer beneath the rock. The click of the burner, the hiss of the blue flame. While the coffee brewed, Noah went to the back door and pushed it open. The screen door groaned on its hinges, a sound that had been on the to-fix list since before the funeral. Kodiak was waiting. The German shepherd rose from his spot on the porch mat, his movements fluid and silent. He didn't bark. Kodiak rarely barked without cause. Instead, he padded over to Noah and pressed his heavy head against the boy's thigh. Noah dropped his hand, burying his fingers in the thick copper and black fur behind the dog's ears. "Morning, boy," Noah whispered, his voice rough with sleep. Kodiak looked up, his amber eyes bright and unsettlingly intelligent. There was a notch in his left ear, a jagged triangle missing from a fight with a bold coyote the previous winter. It gave him a rakish, dangerous look that didn't match the gentle way he leaned his 90-pound weight against the boy. Sarah Mercer had brought him home as a puppy when the first rounds of chemo started, a tumbling ball of fuzz and teeth. "He's not just a dog, Noah," she had told him, her voice already beginning to thin out. "He's a watcher. He sees the things we miss. You listen to him." Now Kodiak was the shadow Noah couldn't shake, and wouldn't want to. They stood together on the porch, watching the light bleed down the canyon walls. The air smelled of dust and dry pine resin. To the west, the land dropped away into the labyrinth of the Red Rock Canyon, a protected wilderness that bordered their property. The Mercer land was the last stronghold of private earth before the world turned into government-protected wild. It was beautiful, harsh, and indifferent to whether they survived on it or not. Behind him, the floorboards creaked. "Coffee smells good." Noah turned. His father, Thomas Mercer, stood in the doorway. He looked like he had been carved out of the same sandstone as the cliffs, hard, weathered, and eroding. He was only 39, but the last 24 months had aged him a decade. There was silver in his beard now, and deep grooves bracketed his mouth, lines etched by the kind of grief that doesn't scream but grinds. He wore his work boots, already laced, and a canvas jacket that had seen better days. "Made it strong," Noah said, moving to the cupboard to pull down 2 mugs, one for Thomas, one for himself. He had started drinking coffee 6 months ago. Thomas hadn't stopped him. It felt like a silent acknowledgement that Noah wasn't really a child anymore. They sat at the small wooden table, the steam rising between them. This was their ritual. The silence that sat at the table with them wasn't angry, but it was dense. It was a silence filled with the things they couldn't say, because saying them made them real all over again. Thomas took a long sip, closing his eyes as the heat hit him. When he opened them, his gaze drifted to the pile of mail sitting on the corner of the table. Noah followed his look. He knew what they were. The envelopes with the red stamps, the windowed envelopes that showed aggressive bold type, medical bills, the lingering, crushing financial hangover of a 2-year war against a cancer that had won anyway. Thomas reached out and shoved the stack slightly away, as if distance could neutralize the numbers inside. "I've got to head up to the north pasture today," Thomas said, his voice gravelly. "Fences down again. Elk, probably." "I can come," Noah said immediately. "I can help stretch the wire." Thomas looked at him, and for a second, the hardness in his face softened. He saw the boy in the oversized shirt, the eagerness to be useful, the desperate need to fill the void. "You've got schoolwork, Noah. Math and geology." "We're falling behind on the curriculum." "I'm ahead in geology," Noah argued gently. "I finished the unit on sedimentary stratification last week, and I can do the math tonight. It's a 2-man job, Dad. You can't pull the tensioner and hammer the staples at the same time." "I've done it before," Thomas said, but there was no heat in it. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Not today, son. I need you here. Check the water levels in the lower tank. And the garden, the tomatoes are drying out." Noah looked down at his coffee. He knew what "I need you here" meant. It meant Thomas needed to be alone. It meant the pressure of the debt and the memories out on the fence line were things he wanted to wrestle with in private. It meant he was trying to protect Noah from the grind of the ranch work, even though Noah was already knee-deep in it. "Okay," Noah said quietly. "I'll handle the tank." Thomas stood up, draining his mug. He reached out and squeezed Noah's shoulder. His hand was heavy, calloused, and warm. "You're a good kid, Noah. Your mom, she'd be proud of how you step up." The mention of her tightened Noah's throat. He nodded, unable to speak. Thomas grabbed his hat and walked out the door. Noah watched him go, watching the way his father walked with his head down, shoulders hunched against a weight that had nothing to do with gravity. Once the truck rattled down the long dirt driveway, disappearing into a cloud of red dust, the isolation settled in. This was Noah's world now. No school bus, no lockers, no chaotic lunchrooms. Just the house, the books, the chores, and the millions of acres of stone. He washed the mugs and dried them, placing them precisely where they belonged. Order was important. Chaos felt dangerous. "Come on, Kodiak," Noah said. The dog was already at the door, tail sweeping the air. They stepped out into the heat. It was only 8 in the morning, but the sun was already asserting its dominance. Noah walked to the vegetable garden his mother had planted 3 years ago. It was a fenced-in patch of green defying the desert, an act of stubborn hope. She had loved this garden. "You have to coax life out of this place, Noah," she used to say, her hands covered in dark soil. "The desert gives you nothing for free. You have to ask it nicely." Noah grabbed the hose. He wasn't asking nicely anymore. He was just trying to keep things alive. He watered the tomatoes and the struggling squash, the water turning the dust to dark mud. Kodiak patrolled the perimeter of the chicken coop, sniffing intently at the wire mesh, checking for signs of fox or weasel. As the water hissed, Noah looked out at the land. The Mercer property had been in the family since his great-grandfather came west, with nothing but a mule and a bad lung condition. They held the deed to 600 acres of scrub, rock, and canyon rim. It was money-poor but land-rich. Or at least, it used to be. Now with the letters piling up on the table, Noah understood enough to know that the land was becoming a liability. He had heard his father on the phone late at night, his voice low and desperate, talking to bankers, talking to lawyers who wanted retainers they didn't have. Noah turned off the hose. He hated feeling helpless. He hated being 12. At 12, you were old enough to understand the tragedy but too young to fix it. He couldn't write checks. He couldn't get a job in town because town was 40 miles away. All he could do was water the tomatoes and check the tank levels. "Let's go check the tank," he told Kodiak. They hiked a half-mile down the gentle slope behind the barn. The water tank was a rusted steel cylinder that fed the troughs for their small herd of cattle. Noah climbed the ladder, the metal burning his hands, and peered in. It was low. The pump was struggling. He'd have to tell his dad tonight. Another thing to fix. Another cost. He jumped down, landing in the dust with a thud. Kodiak nudged his hand, sensing the frustration rolling off him in waves. "I know," Noah said, scratching the dog's chest. "I know." He looked back at the house. It seemed small against the backdrop of the cliffs. He thought about the math book sitting on the table inside. Fractions, ratios. It felt so pointless. What did ratios matter when the aquifer was dropping? What did history dates matter when the bank was threatening to take the future? He needed to get away. He needed the one place where the noise in his head stopped. "You want to go for a walk?" Noah asked. The change in Kodiak was instant. The dog's posture sharpened. His tail gave a singular, decisive wag. "Not just a walk," Noah amended, looking toward the jagged cut of the canyon rim to the west. "Let's go to the split rock. Maybe track that fox we saw last week. It was a rebellion, small and quiet. He should be doing math. He should be staying close to the house." But the house was full of ghosts and the silence of unopened envelopes. The canyon was full of wind and life. He went back inside just long enough to grab his pack. He filled his canteen, grabbed a handful of jerky, and checked his pocket knife. He paused by the mantel in the living room. There was a photo there, framed in simple wood. It was the three of them, him, Thomas, and Sarah, standing by the river 3 years ago. Sarah was laughing, her hair blown across her face, alive and vibrant. Thomas had his arm around her, looking younger, lighter, and Noah was smiling, a gap-toothed grin of a boy who didn't know yet that the world could break. He touched the edge of the frame, a quick, superstitious tap. "I'm going out, Mom. Keep an eye on Dad." He stepped back out, into the sun. The heat was rising, shimmering in waves off the hardpan. "Let's go," he signaled to Kodiak. They moved away from the ranch, past the barn, past the last line of barbed wire fencing. The transition from ranch land to wilderness was subtle. The grass became sparser, the rocks sharper. The ground dropped away in tiered shelves of sandstone, descending toward the river that cut through the canyon bottom miles away. Noah moved with the easy, loping gait of a canyon child. He knew which rocks would hold and which would crumble. He knew to watch for the dark crevices where rattlesnakes sought shade during the heat of the day. He knew that the cactus spines could pierce leather. This was his classroom now. His mother had started homeschooling him when she got sick, wanting to keep him close, wanting to fill his head with the things she loved before she ran out of time. She taught him the names of the geologic eras: Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous. She showed him how the red of the rocks came from oxidized iron, essentially rust. She taught him that the canyon was a book, if you knew how to read the layers. "We are just a blink, Noah," she had told him once, sitting on the edge of a precipice. "These rocks have been here for millions of years. Your problem's my sickness. The rocks don't care." That sounds scary, but it's actually comforting. It means the world is big enough to hold our sadness without breaking. Noah paused at the top of a rise, looking out over the vast expanse of red rock. It was a sea of stone, frozen in time. Spires and buttes rose like ruined cathedrals. It was a landscape that demanded respect. Kodiak trotted ahead, nose to the ground. He was tracking. Noah watched him, studying the dog's body language. Tail low meant he was concentrating. Ears forward meant he had a scent. Noah tried to mimic him. He looked at the ground, scanning the dust. He found the tracks of a jackrabbit, the frantic, erratic spacing, suggesting it had been running from something. He found the slide marks of a lizard. And then, near a cluster of sagebrush, he saw it, the small, delicate print of a desert fox. "Good boy," Noah whispered. "You found him." Kodiak looked back, panting, a doggy grin on his face. This was their gang. They were hunters, explorers, survivors. Out here, Noah wasn't the sad kid whose mom died. He was Noah of the canyon. He was capable. He was strong. They followed the tracks for an hour, descending deeper into the labyrinth. The ranch house disappeared from view, swallowed by the topography. The sun beat down on Noah's shoulders, hot and heavy, but he welcomed it. The sweat felt like work. It felt like he was doing something real. They reached a section of the canyon called the Narrows, where the walls closed in and the trail hugged a steep drop-off. The river was audible now, a distant roar echoing up from the depths. Noah stopped to drink from his canteen. The water was warm but wet. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "We should turn back soon," he said to Kodiak. "Dad will be back for lunch." But Kodiak wasn't looking at him. The dog was standing rigid at the edge of the trail, his body angled toward the abyss. His hackles, the fur along his spine, were standing straight up. He wasn't panting anymore. His mouth was closed, his breathing shallow and fast. "What is it?" Noah asked, capping his canteen. He expected to see a coyote, or maybe a mountain lion on the opposite ridge. He stepped up beside the dog, placing a hand on Kodiak's flank. The muscles beneath the fur were vibrating with tension. Kodiak didn't look at Noah. He stared down over the edge of the cliff, toward the river 400 feet below. Then, the sound came. It wasn't the scream of a hawk. It wasn't the wind. It was a howl, but not from a wolf. Kodiak threw his head back and let out a sound Noah had never heard before. A high, piercing keen that echoed off the canyon walls, a sound of pure, unadulterated distress. It was a summons. Noah's stomach dropped. The air suddenly felt colder, despite the noon sun. He stepped closer to the precipice, his boots crunching on the loose gravel, and looked down into the shadows of the canyon floor. He squinted against the glare. At first, he saw only the brown rush of the river, and the jagged black rocks breaking the current. But then, movement. A flash of color that didn't belong in the desert. A splash of unnatural blue against the red mud. It was a person, down there, in the violence of the water, clinging to a piece of driftwood that looked ready to snap. Noah's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He was 12 years old. He was alone. He was 3 miles from the ranch. Kodiak looked at him, then back at the river, and barked. A sharp, commanding bark that snapped Noah out of his trance. "Help people. That's what we're here for." His mother's voice was so clear in his head, she might have been standing right behind him. Noah looked at the vertical descent. It was dangerous. It was stupid. He dropped his pack. "Okay," he whispered, the word lost in the wind. "Okay." He didn't know that the figure down there was the beginning of the end of his life, as he knew it. He didn't know that pulling her from the water would bring a predator into their home, far more dangerous than any mountain lion. He only knew that someone was drowning, and he was the only one who could stop it. He grabbed his rope. "Show me the way down, Kodiak." The dog didn't hesitate. He plunged over the rim, finding a goat path Noah hadn't seen. Noah took a breath of the hot, dry air and followed him into the dark. As Noah began the terrifying descent, focusing only on his footing and the desperate need to reach the stranger, he missed the one detail that might have made him stop. High on the opposite ridge, a glint of sunlight reflected off glass. Not a rock, not water, but a lens. Someone was watching. And they weren't watching the woman in the river. They were watching the boy. The heat in Red Rock Canyon didn't just rise. It pressed down, a physical weight that sat on the back of the neck and the shoulders. By mid-morning, the air was vibrating, turning the horizon into a watery mirage of shifting stone. Noah wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of a dusty sleeve, squinting against the glare. The world here was reduced to two elementals, the brutal, blinding blue of the sky and the endless, jagged rust of the earth. He was miles from the ranch now, deep in the sector his father called the Devil's Throat, a section of the property where the land buckled and twisted into a maze of slot canyons and sheer drops. It was dangerous ground. Flash floods could tear through these narrows without a cloud in the sky, fed by rainstorms 30 miles north, turning dry washes into deadly torrents of mud and timber in seconds. Rattlesnakes coiled in the cool shadows of the overhangs, invisible until the dry CHCHCH warning that stopped your heart. But Noah moved through it, with a kind of fluid grace, his boots finding purchase on the slick rock, his center of gravity low. He wasn't just walking, he was hunting. Not for a kill. Noah had never had the stomach for pulling the trigger, a fact that his father accepted with a quiet, disappointed sigh, but for knowledge. He was tracking the desert fox again. He had lost the trail a mile back near a patch of prickly pear cactus, the prints vanishing into a stretch of hard basalt where claws left no mark. But Noah knew the fox's habits. He knew it would seek shade as the sun climbed. "Find him, Kodiak," Noah whispered. The shepherd was 10 yards ahead, his nose working the air like a bellows. Kodiak was in his element here. At the ranch, he was a pet, a companion who slept on the rug. Out here, he was an apex predator, stripped of domestic softness. His muscles rippled beneath his copper coat as he scrambled up a shelf of sandstone, his nails clicking a rhythm on the rock. He paused, looked back at Noah, and sneezed. A signal. This way. Noah followed, scrambling up the rock face. His hands were rough, calloused from ranch work and rock climbing. He checked his harness, a habit ingrained by his father. The canyon doesn't forgive mistakes, Noah. You clip in, or you don't go. He wore the climbing harness even on flat hikes. It was as much a part of his wardrobe as his boots. A 50-foot coil of static rope was slung over his shoulder, heavy and reassuring. They crested a ridge, and the view blew open. Below them, the canyon dropped away in a series of terrifying steps, descending 400 feet to the river bottom. From this height, the river looked like a lazy brown snake. But Noah knew better. It was swollen with snowmelt from the Rockies, a churning, freezing force that carved through the stone with the violence of a buzzsaw. The roar of the water was a constant, low-frequency hum that vibrated through the soles of his boots. Noah took a drink from his canteen, the water warm and metallic. He scanned the ridge line. No fox. Just the vast, empty theater of the desert. Maybe he circled back. Noah mused aloud. The sound of his own voice was small, swallowed instantly by the vastness. He turned to call Kodiak, but the dog was gone. Kodiak? Silence. Just the wind hissing through the sagebrush. Kodiak, Noah whistled, a sharp two-note blast that usually brought the dog running. Nothing. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at Noah's chest. Kodiak never wandered off. Not out here. The dog's protective instinct was a tether that kept him within 50 yards of Noah at all times. For him to vanish meant something had pulled him away. Something wrong. Noah broke into a run, skirting the edge of the drop-off. Kodiak. Here, boy. He scrambled over a pile of scree, sliding and nearly losing his footing. He rounded a massive fin of sandstone that jutted out over the abyss like the prow of a ship. There, Kodiak was standing at the very lip of the precipice, his front paws perched on a rock that hung out over open air. His posture was terrifyingly rigid. His tail was tucked, his ears pinned flat against his skull. He wasn't looking at Noah. He was staring down into the void. Noah slowed, his breath catching. Kodiak, back, get back. The dog didn't move. He didn't even acknowledge the command. Instead, he opened his mouth and released a sound that froze the blood in Noah's veins. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't the aggressive roar he used on strangers or coyotes. It was a howl, but broken, a high, wavering keen of pure distress that sounded almost human. It was the sound of a creature witnessing death. Noah dropped to his knees and crawled the last few feet, keeping his center of gravity low, terrified the dog would jump. He reached out and grabbed Kodiak's collar, burying his hand in the thick fur. I've got you. I've got you. Kodiak trembled under his hand, vibrating like a plucked wire. The dog turned his head, his amber eyes wide and frantic, and nudged Noah's arm with a wet nose, then looked back down. Look, the dog was saying. Look. Noah belly crawled to the edge and peered over. The drop was dizzying. The canyon wall wasn't a straight vertical. It was a series of jagged overhangs and narrow shelves, crumbling red rock that looked ready to slide at a whisper. 30 feet down, a small triangular ledge jutted out, barely wide enough for a mountain goat. Below that, nothing but 300 feet of empty air and the violent white water of the river. And there, clinging to the root of a dead juniper tree that twisted out of the rock face, was a woman. Noah gasped, the air rushing out of him. She was pressed flat against the stone, her knuckles white where she gripped the dry wood of the root. One leg hung uselessly over the edge of the small shelf, dangling in the void. She wasn't moving. She looked like a piece of debris caught in the flood, small and broken. "Hey!" Noah screamed, his voice cracking. "Hey! Can you hear me?" The woman's head snapped up. Her face was a pale oval against the dark rock, her hair matted with dust and sweat. Her eyes found him, wide and terrified. "Help!" Her voice was thin, snatched away by the wind, but the desperation in it hit Noah like a physical blow. "I'm slipping. The root. It's breaking." As if to emphasize her words, a shower of pebbles clattered loose from around the juniper root, falling silently into the abyss. The dead wood groaned, a dry cracking sound that echoed up the canyon wall. Noah's mind went blank, then snapped into a hyper-focused clarity. He was 12 years old. He was alone. There was no cell service here. If he ran for help, it would take him 2 hours to get back to the ranch and another hour for his father to return. By then she would be gone. He looked at the root. It was gray and brittle. It wouldn't hold for 3 hours. It might not hold for 3 minutes. Help people. That's what we're here for. His mother's words. They weren't just a memory. They were a command. She had died helping people, volunteering at the clinic until she was too sick to stand. She had raised him to believe that inaction was a sin. "Don't move," Noah yelled down, his voice trying to find an octave of authority he didn't possess. "I'm coming down." "No," the woman screamed back. "It's too steep. You'll fall." "I have a rope," Noah shouted. He scrambled back from the edge, his hands moving automatically to the coil on his shoulder. He scanned the immediate area. He needed an anchor. The sandstone here was friable, prone to crumbling. He couldn't trust a rock wedge. He needed something rooted. 10 feet back from the edge stood an ancient mesquite tree, its trunk gnarled and thick, roots digging deep into the bedrock. "Perfect," Noah whispered. He ran to the tree, uncoiling the rope as he went. He wrapped the static line around the trunk 3 times, tying a figure 8 on a bight, followed by a double fisherman's knot to secure the tail. His father had made him practice these knots until his fingers bled, until he could tie them in the dark, underwater or upside down. "Your life hangs on the knot, Noah. Make it beautiful." He tugged on the anchor. The tree didn't budge. It was solid as the earth itself. He ran the other end of the rope through the belay device on his harness, locking the carabiner. He checked the gate, locked. He checked his harness buckles, doubled back. He looked at Kodiak. The dog was still at the edge, whining softly, pacing back and forth. "Kodiak, come here," Noah commanded. The dog trotted over, sensing the shift in energy. Noah knelt, grabbing the dog's face in his hands. "I need you to stay. You stay right here by the tree. Guard the rope, understand?" Kodiak licked Noah's chin, a quick, anxious swipe, and then sat down directly on top of the coils of excess rope, planting his heavy body like a stone lion. "Good boy." Noah backed toward the cliff edge, feeding slack through his device. The fear hit him then. It wasn't the adrenaline of the initial discovery. It was the cold, sickening realization of what he was about to do. He was going over the edge. He hated heights. He climbed because his father wanted him to, because it was a skill. But looking down, that 400-foot drop made his stomach turn to water. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the scent of sage and dust. Just the ledge. Just 30 feet. He turned around, facing the anchor, and leaned back, trusting the harness to catch his weight. The rope went taut. The tree held. "Coming down," he yelled. He walked backward, off the edge of the world. The transition from horizontal to vertical was jarring. One moment he was on solid ground, the next he was hanging in space, his boots scrabbling against the cliff face. The wind hit him harder here, rushing up from the canyon floor, tugging at his clothes. He lowered himself slowly, hand over hand, feeding the rope. The wall was rough, scraping his knuckles. Dust puffed out from under his boots, raining down on the woman below. "I'm sorry," he called out. "Close your eyes." He descended past layers of time, sandstone deposited 10 million years ago, shale from an ancient sea. He was moving through history to save a stranger. 10 feet, 20 feet. He was level with her now, but 5 feet to the right. He locked off the rope and looked at her. Up close, she was in worse shape than he thought. Her face was gray, drained of blood, and her lips were cracked. She was shivering violently, despite the heat. Her hands, gripping the root, were locked in a rigor of terror. Her eyes were hazel, wide and glassy, fixed on him with a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. "Hi," Noah said, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm Noah." "Noah," she whispered, as if testing the name. I can't hold on much longer, Noah. You don't have to hold on. I've got you." Noah swung slightly, pushing off the wall to pendulum toward her. He reached the ledge, his boots finding a narrow purchase on the slick stone. He was unclipped from his protection now, relying on the tension of the rope to keep him on the wall. It was precarious. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a looped sling, a runner. "I'm going to clip this to you. You have to let go with one hand." "I can't," she sobbed. "If I let go, I'll fall." "You won't fall," Noah said, staring into her eyes, channeling his father's calm. "Look at me. Look at the rope. It holds 1,000 pounds. I weigh 80. You weigh, well, not 1,000. It holds us." She looked at the rope, then back at him. She took a ragged breath, squeezed her eyes shut, and peeled her right hand off the root. Noah moved fast. He looped the sling around her waist, threading it through itself to create a girth hitch, and clipped the carabiner to his own harness belay loop. It wasn't the perfect rescue technique. A pick-off required more gear than he had, but it connected her to him, and him to the rope. "Okay," Noah said, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might bruise his ribs. "You're clipped to me. Now on 3 you have to let go of the root and grab onto my harness. Okay?" She shook her head frantically. "Yes," Noah said, harder this time. "The root is breaking. Listen to it." A sharp crack came from the dry wood. The juniper shifted an inch. She screamed, a short, sharp sound, and lunged at him. The sudden weight transfer nearly pulled Noah off the wall. He slammed into the rock face, the breath knocked out of him, as she wrapped her arms around his legs, burying her face in his stomach. The rope groaned under the double load, stretching tight. Above them, Noah heard a sharp bark. "Kodiak. Checking in. It's okay." Noah yelled up, though he wasn't sure it was. "We're okay." He looked down at the woman. She was dead weight, sobbing into his shirt. "You have to help me," he grunted. "I can't pull us both up. You have to climb." "I can't walk," she gasped. "My ankle. I think it's broken." Noah looked at her left foot. It was swollen, the boot laces straining against the puffiness. "Okay," Noah said, gritting his teeth. "Okay, then you use your good leg, and you pull on the rope. We go up together, inch by inch." The ascent was a nightmare. Every foot of gain was a battle against gravity. Noah would squat, pushing up with his legs, hauling on the rope with his arms, while the woman, Claire, she had said her name was, scrambled and clawed with her good side. The harness dug into Noah's hips, bruising the bone. His hands burned. Dust coated his throat, making him cough. "Pull," Noah grunted. "I'm trying." They moved like a clumsy four-legged insect, scraping against the stone. Noah's arms screamed. He was just a boy. He wasn't strong enough for this. He wanted to cry. He wanted his dad. He wanted to let go. "Help, people." He pulled again. They reached the lip of the overhang. Kodiak was there instantly. The dog didn't just bark. He lunged forward, grabbing the back of Noah's shirt in his powerful jaws and pulling backward, adding his 90 pounds of muscle to the effort. With one final, agonizing heave, Noah rolled over the edge, dragging the woman with him. They collapsed onto the flat rock, a tangle of limbs and rope and dust. For a long time, there was only the sound of their breathing, harsh, ragged gasps that tore at their lungs. The sun beat down on them, indifferent. Noah lay on his back, staring up at the blue sky. It was spinning. His arms felt like lead. He had done it. He had actually done it. A bubble of hysterical laughter rose in his throat. Beside him, the woman pushed herself up to a sitting position. She wiped her face, smearing mud and tears across her cheeks. She looked around, her eyes darting to the horizon, then to her bag, then to Noah. "You saved me," she whispered. She sounded shocked. Not just grateful, but genuinely surprised. "You actually saved me." Noah sat up, wincing as his muscles seized. He began to undo the carabiner connecting them. "Are you okay? Your ankle?" She hissed in pain as she shifted her leg. "It hurts like hell, but I'm alive." She looked at him, really looked at him, her gaze sharpening. "You're just a kid. How did you know how to do that?" "My dad taught me," Noah said, a flush of pride warming his chest. "I'm Noah Mercer. We live on the ranch back that way." "Noah Mercer," she repeated. She reached out a trembling hand. "I'm Claire." "Claire Donnelly." Noah took her hand. It was cold and clammy. "I'm a photographer," she said quickly, the words rushing out. "I was trying to get a shot of the light hitting the water. I know it was stupid. I stepped on some loose shale and I just slid. I couldn't stop." She gestured to the heavy, waterproof bag she had refused to let go of, even during the climb. My cameras are in there. They're my life. I couldn't drop them. Noah nodded. It made sense. People did crazy things for pictures out here. We get a lot of photographers, he said politely, but usually they stay on the rim. I learned my lesson, Claire said, attempting a weak smile. It didn't quite reach her eyes. We need to get you to the ranch, Noah said. My dad has a first aid kit. We can drive you to the hospital in Flagstaff. He stood up and offered her a hand. She took it, pulling herself up on her good leg. She swayed, dizzy, and Noah braced her. Easy, he said. Then, a low rumble started. It came from deep in her chest, a sound like grinding stones. Noah looked down. Kodiak was standing between him and Claire. The dog's head was lowered, his ears flattened against his skull. His lips were curled back, revealing white teeth that gleamed in the sun. He was looking directly at Claire. Kodiak, no, Noah said, shocked. Kodiak had never growled at a human like that. Never. He was a protector, sure, but he was friendly once the danger was past. Kodiak, stand down. The dog didn't move. He took a stiff-legged step toward Claire, the growl escalating into a snarl. Claire shrank back, her face going pale again. She clutched her bag to her chest, putting it between her and the dog. He doesn't like me. He's just worked up, Noah stammered, grabbing Kodiak's collar and hauling him back. The dog resisted, his eyes locked on Claire with an intensity that frightened Noah. It wasn't confusion in the dog's eyes. It was recognition. It was hate. He's been guarding the rope. He's stressed. He's usually a big baby. It's okay, Claire said, her voice tight. She wasn't looking at the dog's teeth. She was looking at the dog's eyes, and she looked afraid in a way that had nothing to do with being bitten. Dogs get weird around me sometimes. Noah dragged Kodiak back, forcing the dog into a sit. Stay, he ordered, putting as much dominance into his voice as he could muster. Kodiak sat, but he didn't relax. He kept his body interposed between the boy and the woman, a living shield. Come on, Noah said, turning his back on the weird tension. Lean on me. It's a long walk. The journey back was a blur of heat and pain. Claire leaned heavily on Noah's shoulder, her breath hissing through her teeth every time her bad foot grazed the ground. Noah bore her weight, his own exhausted legs trembling. They moved slowly, stopping every 10 minutes for water. Claire talked as they walked, a stream of chatter that felt slightly too loud for the quiet desert. She asked him about the ranch. She asked about his dad. She asked how long they had lived there. 3 generations, Noah said, proud to share the history. My great-grandpa built the main house. That's amazing, Claire said. So you own all this? All the way to the canyon? Yeah, Noah said. It's a lot of work. I bet, she said. She adjusted her grip on her camera bag. Is it just you and your dad? And Kodiak, Noah said. At the mention of his name, the dog, who was trailing 10 feet behind them, let out a sharp woof. He wasn't scouting ahead anymore. He was rear-guarding, watching her back. Right, Claire said softly. And Kodiak, by the time the ranch house came into view, the sun was beginning its afternoon descent, turning the sky a hazy white gold. The sight of the tin roof shimmering in the heat was the best thing Noah had ever seen. He was exhausted, his hands were raw, his shoulders ached, and he was covered in red dust. But as he looked at the woman limping beside him, a fierce pride swelled in his chest. He hadn't just watered tomatoes today. He hadn't just done math. He had saved a life. He had reached into the jaws of the canyon and pulled someone out. Almost there, Noah said, pointing. That's Dad's truck. He's back. Claire looked at the house. Her eyes narrowed slightly, scanning the property, the barn, the solar panels, the fence lines. It wasn't the look of a rescued victim seeing sanctuary. It was the look of a surveyor checking coordinates. It's charming, she said. They reached the porch steps just as the screen door flew open. Thomas Mercer stepped out, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. He froze when he saw them. His son, covered in dirt and sweat, supporting a stranger who looked like she'd been through a war. Noah. Thomas dropped the rag and bounded down the steps. What the hell happened? I found her, Dad, Noah said, beaming, his fatigue forgotten for a second. She fell off the rim at the Narrows. I rappelled down. I got her. Thomas stopped, his eyes moving from Noah to Claire. The relief on his face was instant, followed quickly by the walled-off suspicion of a man who didn't like surprises. You rappelled down the Narrows? Thomas asked, his voice low. He looked at Claire. You okay, miss? I am now, Claire said, straightening up and offering a hand, though she leaned heavily on the railing. She projected a sudden, surprising poise, masking the pain. Your son is a hero, Mr. Mercer. He saved my life. I'm Claire. Thomas took her hand cautiously. Thomas. Let's get you inside. That ankle looks bad." As they helped her up the stairs, Kodiak refused to come onto the porch. He stood at the bottom of the steps, rigid as a statue. He let out one low, vibrating growl that seemed to vibrate through the wood of the deck. Thomas paused, looking back at the dog. "What's gotten into him?" "He's just protective," Noah said quickly, wanting everything to be perfect. "He's had a long day." "Right," Thomas muttered. He held the door open. Claire limped inside, clutching her bag tight. Noah followed, but as the door clicked shut, shutting out the glare of the desert, Noah felt a strange heaviness settle in his gut. He looked through the screen mesh. Kodiak was still standing there in the dust. The dog wasn't looking at the door. He was looking at the ground where Claire had been standing. He walked over to her footprint in the dust, sniffed it once, and then looked up at the house with an expression of profound, mournful warning. Noah turned away, pushing the feeling down. He was a hero today. It was going to be okay. He didn't see what fell out of Claire's pocket as she collapsed onto the living room sofa. It was small, metallic, and rolled under the edge of the rug before anyone could notice. It wasn't a lens cap. It was a spent casing from a high-caliber flare gun. Something a lost photographer wouldn't carry, but a surveyor marking boundaries in remote wilderness definitely would. Later that evening, while Noah slept the sleep of the exhausted, Thomas Mercer would find the small metal casing under the rug. He would turn it over in his rough hands, recognizing the brand immediately. It was military grade. He looked toward the guest room where the stranger slept, and for the first time in years he unlocked the gun safe in the hallway closet. He didn't load the rifle, but he took it out, cleaned it, and set it by the back door. Noah had brought home a stray, but Thomas knew the smell of a wolf in sheep's clothing, and he had a terrible feeling the sheep had just invited the pack to dinner. The Mercer ranch house was not built for guests. It was built for survival, for long winters and blistering summers, and for a family that had slowly contracted until the rooms felt too large for the people left inside. As Noah held the screen door open, the hinges screaming their familiar protest, the silence of the house seemed to rush out to meet them. It was a cool, dim silence, smelling of lemon polish, wood smoke, and the underlying dusty scent of old paper. To Noah, it was the smell of safety. To Claire Donnelly, limping across the threshold with a hand gripped tightly on Noah's shoulder, it must have smelled like a trap she had walked into on purpose. "Watch the step," Noah said, his voice solicitous, eager. He felt a strange, vibrating energy in his chest, the novelty of a visitor. It had been months since anyone other than the UPS driver or the occasional lost hiker had stepped foot in their living room. Thomas followed them in, letting the heavy wooden doors shut with a finality that made the windows rattle in their frames. He didn't take his hat off immediately. He stood in the entryway, eyes scanning the room as if seeing it through a stranger's eyes. The worn patches on the rug, the stack of geology textbooks on the coffee table, the layer of dust on the mantel that he hadn't had the heart to clean since Sarah passed. "Kitchen," Thomas said, his voice flat. "Better light. Let's get a look at that ankle." They moved into the kitchen, the heart of the house. It was a large, open space with cabinets made of knotty pine that had darkened to the color of honey over the decades. A massive butcher block island dominated the center, scarred by years of chopping and prep work. Copper pots hung from a rack above, catching the afternoon light that filtered through the gingham curtains. Claire sank into one of the wooden chairs, letting out a breath that was half hiss, half sigh. She eased her left boot off, wincing as the leather slid over the swelling. Noah hovered, unsure of where to put himself. He watched his father kneel, his movements efficient and clinical. Thomas had treated horses, cattle, and dogs. He knew bones and ligaments better than some doctors. He rolled down Claire's sock with gentle, calloused fingers. The ankle was already turning a violent shade of blue-black, puffed up to twice its normal size. "That's a nasty sprain," Thomas said, prodding the tender flesh. Claire flinched, her hand gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. "Maybe a hairline fracture. You can't put weight on this for a week, maybe 2. "I don't have 2 weeks, Claire said, panic flaring in her eyes, a flash of genuine emotion that Noah misread as distress over her trip. "I have a deadline. The publisher needs the proofs by the end of the month." Thomas looked up at her, his gaze steady and uncomfortably direct. "The Canyon doesn't care about your deadlines, Miss Donnelly. You walk on that, you'll cripple yourself." He stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I'll get the ice pack. Noah, fetch the first aid kit from the bathroom. The big one." "On it," Noah said, scrambling away. As he ran down the hall, he heard his father's voice drop, the tone shifting from medic to interrogator. "You were way off the trail, Miss Donnelly. The Narrows aren't on any tourist map. How'd you get down there?" Noah paused, listening. "I told you." Claire's voice floated back, smooth and embarrassed. "I was chasing the light. I saw a ridge that looked like it had a better angle on the river. I didn't realize how unstable the shale was until I was sliding. That's protected land, Thomas said. Strictly speaking, you were trespassing on federal wilderness. And before that, you crossed my fence line. I saw the fence, Claire admitted. I thought it was just cattle control. I didn't see any signs. I'm so sorry, Mr. Mercer. I really am. When I see a shot, I get tunnel vision. Noah grabbed the red metal box from under the sink and hurried back, not wanting to miss anything. When he returned, Claire was pulling a camera out of her waterproof bag. It was a beast of a machine, a high-end DSLR with a lens as thick as a soda can. She handled it with a reverence that seemed to soften Thomas's skepticism. Look, she said, flipping the view screen around. This is what I was trying to get. Noah leaned in, his shoulder brushing hers. The image on the small screen was breathtaking. It was a shot of a peregrine falcon in mid-dive, a blur of slate-gray motion against the red wall of the canyon. The focus was razor-sharp, capturing the fierce intelligence in the bird's eye. Whoa, Noah breathed. That's incredible. That was 2 days ago, Claire said, offering him a small, tight smile. I've been out here for a week, scouting locations. I have a website, if you want to check. https://www.google.com/search?q=clairedonnellynature.com. Here, she fished a business card out of a side pocket of the bag. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock, embossed with a stylized fern logo. Thomas took the card, turning it over in his rough fingers. He didn't look at the website. He looked at the card, then at the camera, then at her boots. He was calculating the cost of the gear, the quality of the print, the consistency of the story. We'll get you iced up, Thomas said finally, tucking the card into his shirt pocket. But I'm calling the ranger station. They need to know there's a vehicle abandoned on the old logging road, assuming that's where you parked. It is, Claire said quickly. A black SUV. Rental. And they need to know you're here, Thomas added, in case anyone is looking for you. No one is, Claire said, and for a second, the mask slipped. Her voice sounded hollow, echoing in a way that made Noah's heart ache. I work alone. Mostly. I'll make the call, Thomas said. He grabbed the ice pack from the freezer, wrapped it in a dish towel, and propped her foot up on a spare chair. Noah, keep her company. Don't talk her ear off. As Thomas retreated to his office, the small room off the living room, where he fought his wars with the bank, Noah felt a thrill of responsibility. He was the host now. He sat in the chair opposite her, watching her adjust the ice pack. Does it hurt a lot? He asked. It throbs, she admitted, leaning back and closing her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were scanning the room again, landing on the bookshelf behind him. You have a lot of books on geology. Is your dad a rockhound? No, those are mine, Noah said, sitting up straighter. Well, they were Mom's, but I read them. I'm studying the stratification of the Permian layer right now. You're 12, right? Claire asked, eyebrows raised. Most 12-year-olds are playing video games. We don't have internet out here. Not really. Just satellite, and it's slow. Noah shrugged. Besides, rocks are cooler. They tell stories. He jumped up. Wait right here. He ran to the mantel and grabbed a small, polished stone, a piece of petrified wood, striped with agate and quartz. He brought it back and placed it gently on the table in front of her. Mom found this in the wash after a flood, Noah said, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper. It looks like wood, but it's stone. It turned into a jewel because it was buried under pressure for millions of years. Mom said, he paused, his throat tightening. Mom said that's what hard times do to people, make them beautiful and hard. Claire stared at the stone. She didn't touch it. Her expression shifted, a flicker of something painful crossing her face. She looked from the stone to Noah, and her eyes seemed to grow wet. Your mom sounds wise, Claire said softly. She was, Noah said. She died 2 years ago. Cancer. The word hung in the kitchen air, heavy and absolute. Claire looked away, staring out the window at the dusty yard. I'm sorry, Noah. That's a heavy thing to carry. It's okay, Noah said automatically, the response he had learned to give to adults who looked uncomfortable. We're doing okay. Dad and me. A low rumble came from under the table. Noah jumped. He had forgotten Kodiak was there. The dog had followed them in silently and squeezed himself into the space beneath the butcher block island. Now he emerged. He didn't come to Noah. He walked around the table, his nails clicking sharply on the linoleum, and stopped 3 feet from Claire. He sat down. He didn't lie down. He sat, chest out, ears forward, staring at her with an intensity that was almost unnerving. Kodiak, be nice, Noah said. Claire pulled her hands into her lap. He really doesn't like me. He's never seen a stranger in the house before, Noah lied. Kodiak loved strangers. He usually greeted the UPS man with a full-body wiggle. This stone-faced sentinel was a dog Noah didn't know. "It's fine," Claire said, her voice tight. "Animals have instincts. Maybe I smell like fear." "I'll start dinner," Noah announced, desperate to break the tension. "You like stew? I make a mean venison stew." "You cook?" Claire asked, watching him move to the stove. "Dad works late a lot, and, well, someone has to eat." For the next hour, the kitchen was filled with the sounds of cooking. The chop-chop-chop of carrots, the sizzle of onions in the cast-iron pot, the bubbling of broth. It was a domestic symphony that Noah conducted with practiced ease. He wanted to show her he was capable. He wanted to show her that this house, despite the grief, was a good place. Claire watched him. She asked questions about the spices he used, juniper berries from the yard, about the knife skills his dad taught him, about the schoolwork. She was good at asking questions. She deflected every inquiry about herself with a question about him. By the time Thomas returned, the kitchen smelled of rosemary and rich meat. The sun had dipped below the rim, casting long blue shadows across the floor. "Ranger Station knows," Thomas said, washing his hands at the sink. "They said they'll tow the car to town tomorrow. No missing persons report on you, so at least you aren't a fugitive." He said it as a joke, but his eyes didn't smile. "That's a relief," Claire said dryly. They ate at the round table. Noah served the stew, ladling big portions into earthenware bowls. He put a bowl on the floor for Kodiak, prime cuts of venison mixed with kibble. Usually Kodiak attacked his dinner with joyous fervor. Tonight, he looked at the bowl, then looked at Claire. He didn't eat. He walked over to where Noah was sitting and squeezed himself between Noah's chair and Claire's, facing outward. He let out a soft whine, then a low, vibrating growl that was barely audible. "Kodiak, eat," Thomas commanded. The dog ignored him. "He's not hungry," Noah said, reaching down to stroke the dog's head. "He's just tired. He's acting strange," Thomas noted, spooning stew into his mouth. He looked at Claire. "This is good, Noah. Really good." "Thanks," Noah beamed. "It's delicious," Claire added. "Better than anything I've had in a long time." "You have a gift, Noah." The praise made Noah flush with pleasure. "It's Mom's recipe. She wrote everything down before." He trailed off. Thomas put his spoon down. The silence returned. "So," Thomas said, wiping his mouth. "The plan. I can drive you into Flagstaff tomorrow morning. Get you to a hospital. Get you a rental car." Claire froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth. "Tomorrow? You can't stay here, Miss Donnelly," Thomas said, not unkindly, but firmly. "We're not a hotel, and you need medical attention I can't give." "I know," Claire said. She put the spoon down. "It's just the drive. The swelling. I don't know if I can handle 4 hours in a truck right now. And," she looked down at her hands, "I don't have anywhere to go. My flight isn't for 4 days. I was camping. There are hotels in Flagstaff," Thomas said. "Dad," Noah interrupted. Thomas looked at him. "Noah." "Dad, look at her foot," Noah pleaded. "She can barely hobble to the bathroom. If you put her in the truck on those washboard roads, she's going to be in agony." "Noah, it's not our problem," Thomas said, his voice hardening. "Mom wouldn't send her away," Noah said. The words hit the table like a gavel. Thomas flinched. He looked at his son, seeing the desperate need in the boy's eyes. Not just to help, but to have someone to help. To have a female presence in this house of men and dust. Thomas looked at Claire. She wasn't pleading. She was just sitting there, looking small and hurt, with that damn ice pack melting on her ankle. He sighed, a long, weary exhalation that seemed to deflate his shoulders. 3 days, Thomas said. You stay until the swelling goes down enough to travel. You sleep in the guest room downstairs. Noah, you help her with meals. But Tuesday morning, you're in the truck. Understood? Understood, Claire said softly. Thank you, Thomas. Truly. Don't thank me, Thomas muttered, standing up to clear his bowl. Thank the boy. And his mother. Later, after the dishes were done and the moon had risen, a sliver of white bone in the indigo sky, Noah found Claire on the front porch. She was sitting in the rocking chair, her bad leg propped up on the railing, smoking a cigarette she quickly hid when he opened the door. It's okay, Noah said. Dad smokes a pipe sometimes. Outside only. Claire exhaled a thin stream of smoke. Bad habit, don't start. I won't. Noah walked to the edge of the porch and leaned against the railing. The desert night was cold, a sharp contrast to the day's heat. The sky was a riot of stars, so many and so bright that they looked like spilled salt on black velvet. You can see everything out here, Claire murmured, looking up. I forgot how many there are. In the city you see, maybe 10. That's Orion, Noah said, pointing to the hunter's belt. And there, that W shape? That's Cassiopeia. She was a queen who was too vain, so the gods tied her to a chair in the sky. She spends half the year upside down as punishment. Claire laughed, a low, throaty sound. Harsh. Mom taught me, Noah said. She said the stars are the only map that never changes. The land changes, rivers move, but the stars, they stay. He looked at Claire. The moonlight washed out the color in her face, making her look younger, softer. Do you have kids? You asked if I was 12 like you knew what 12 looked like. The silence that followed was long. The cigarette burned down between Claire's fingers. I did, Claire said finally. Her voice was barely a whisper. A daughter. Emma. Did? Noah asked. She passed away, Claire said. The words seemed to tear themselves out of her throat. 4 years ago. She was 11. Noah turned to her, stricken. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. She had eyes like yours, Claire said, looking at him. And for the first time since she arrived, her gaze wasn't calculating. It was ravaged. She was seeing a ghost. Hazel. Full of questions. She loved rocks, too. That's why you were so sad about the petrified wood, Noah realized. Yeah, Claire whispered. She stubbed out the cigarette on the sole of her boot, her hand shaking. Look at you, Noah Mercer. Saving people, cooking stew. You're a good man. Your mom, she did a good job. She tried, Noah said. I miss her. I know, Claire said. She reached out and, for a fleeting second, touched his hand on the railing. Her fingers were warm. I know. For a moment, on that porch, surrounded by the vast indifference of the desert, they were just two broken people, finding a common frequency in the static of grief. Noah felt a warmth bloom in his chest, the feeling of connection he had been starving for. You should get some sleep, Noah said. Dad wakes up early. You too, Claire said. Good night, Noah. Good night, Claire. Noah went inside, locking the door behind him. He felt lighter than he had in months. She was nice. She was sad. Like them. She understood. On the porch, Claire waited until the lights in the house clicked off, one by one. The softness dropped from her face like a curtain falling. She didn't look at the stars anymore. She looked at the darkness of the yard, her eyes hard and focused. She pulled herself up, wincing as her ankle protested, and limped inside. She moved silently through the living room, past the sleeping form of Kodiak on the rug. The dog lifted his head, his eyes reflecting the moonlight, and let out a soft growl. Claire ignored him, moving down the hall to the guest bathroom. She locked the door and turned on the tap, letting the water run to cover any sound. She sat on the closed toilet lid and reached into her pocket. She didn't pull out the business card. She pulled out a device that looked like a thick smartphone, but with a stubby, reinforced antenna. It was a satellite comms unit, encrypted, military-grade. Her fingers flew across the keypad, the backlight illuminating her face in a ghostly green glow. She wasn't the grieving mother now. She was the operative. She brought up the message thread. Sender, Redstone_HQ, Ashford. Time, 21:15 status? Claire stared at the screen. She thought of Noah's face when he talked about the petrified wood. She thought of the stew. She thought of Emma. She closed her eyes for a second, swallowing the bile in her throat. Then she opened them, her face setting into a mask of grim resolve. She typed, recipient, Redstone_HQ infiltration successful. Access secured for 72 hours. Subjects unaware. Survey commences at first light. She hit send. The screen flashed sent. Claire Donnelly stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back was a monster. But monsters got paid. And monsters survived. She turned off the water, flushed the toilet for effect, and walked out to destroy the boy who had just saved her life. As Claire limped back to her room, the house settled into silence. But in the hallway, the darkness moved. Kodiak wasn't asleep. He had padded silently to the guest room door, his nose pressing against the crack at the bottom. He inhaled the scent of the satellite ozone and the sharp metallic tang of deceit. He didn't growl this time. He simply lay down across the threshold, a 90-pound barricade. If she wanted to leave that room to hurt his boy, she would have to go through him. And in the morning, the first thing Noah would find wasn't breakfast, but the dog refusing to let the guest out of her room. The morning arrived with the deception of peace. The sun climbed the ladder of the eastern ridge, painting the Mercer Ranch in soft hues of apricot and dusty rose, temporarily erasing the harsh lines of the struggle that lived within its walls. To Noah, waking up in his room with the familiar scent of sage drifting through the window, the world felt different, lighter. For the first time in 2 years, the house held a presence that wasn't defined by loss or the stoic endurance of men. It held a guest. Noah dressed quickly, pulling on fresh jeans and his boots, skipping the usual lethargy that accompanied the start of his chores. He moved with a new energy, a quiet hum of excitement vibrating in his chest. Downstairs, he could hear the faint clink of a spoon against ceramic. When he entered the kitchen, the scene stopped him. Claire was sitting at the round table, her injured leg propped up on the spare chair, a mug of coffee cradled in her hands. The sunlight caught the dust motes dancing around her, turning her messy dark hair into a halo. She looked tired. Circles bruised the skin under her eyes, but when she saw him, her face brightened into a genuine smile. "Morning, rescuer," she said. Her voice was raspy with sleep. "Morning," Noah said, feeling a sudden shy heat rise in his cheeks. "How's the ankle?" "Colorful," she admitted, shifting slightly. "It looks like a storm cloud. But the ice helped. Your dad, he knows his first aid." "He treats the horses," Noah said, moving to the counter to pour his own juice. "He says legs are legs, whether you have 2 or 4. Claire laughed, a warm sound that seemed to push back the shadows in the corners of the room. "I'll take the compliment." "Where is he?" "North pasture. Fence repair," Noah said. "He left at dawn. Said to tell you to keep icing it." Noah glanced under the table. Kodiak was there, lying in the darkest spot near the pantry door. The dog didn't come out to greet him. He didn't thump his tail. He lay with his chin on his paws, his amber eyes fixed unblinkingly on Claire's boots. The air around the dog felt heavy, charged with a static tension that Noah couldn't quite understand. "He's been watching me like I'm going to steal the silverware," Claire said, nodding toward the dog. She tried to sound joking, but there was a tremor of unease in her tone. "I tried to give him a piece of bacon earlier. He wouldn't take it." Noah frowned. "Kodiak loves bacon. He's probably just off. The heat gets to him." "Right," Claire said. She took a sip of coffee. "So what's on the agenda for today? Since I'm useless as a hiker, maybe I can be useful as a teacher. You liked the camera yesterday." Noah's eyes lit up. "Really? You'd show me." "Grab it," she said, pointing to the waterproof bag resting near the back door. "Let's sit on the porch. The light is good right now." For the next 2 hours, the ranch felt like a sanctuary. They sat on the wooden porch swing, the chains creaking rhythmically, as Claire walked Noah through the mechanics of her high-end DSLR. She was patient, her hands guiding his as he learned to adjust the aperture and shutter speed. She taught him about the rule of thirds, about leading lines, about how to capture the soul of a landscape rather than just its shape. "See that ridge?" Claire pointed to the jagged formation, known as the Devil's Backbone. "Don't just shoot the rock, shoot the shadow. The shadow tells you how tall the rock is. It tells you the time of day. It tells the story." Noah looked through the viewfinder, twisting the focus ring until the red stone became crisp. "Like hidden things," he murmured. "Exactly," Claire said softly. "Photography is about exposing what people miss." She watched him, her expression softening into something profound and melancholy. She looked at his profile, the scattering of freckles across his nose, the serious set of his jaw that mirrored his father's. "You know," she said, leaning back, "this land, it's incredibly unique, geologically speaking." "Yeah," Noah lowered the camera. "Triassic sandstone mostly. But there's volcanic intrusion too." "More than that," Claire said, her voice shifting. It lost the casual warmth of the teacher and took on a sharper, more clinical edge. "The stratification near the riverbed. I noticed the coloring yesterday. The purples and the deep grays. It suggests heavy mineralization. Vanadium, maybe. Or carnotite." Noah looked at her, confused. "Carnotite? That's uranium ore, right? Mom had a book on it." Claire froze for a fraction of a second. She blinked, and the clinical mask vanished, replaced by a flustered smile. "Is it? I just remember hearing the term from a geologist friend. I just meant the colors are intense, very photogenic." "Oh," Noah said, accepting the pivot. "Yeah, it's beautiful." He didn't notice the slip. He didn't notice that a nature photographer shouldn't know the specific visual markers of rare earth minerals used in high-tech manufacturing. He just saw a friend. But Kodiak noticed something. The dog pushed open the screen door with his nose and stepped onto the porch. He didn't lie down. He walked between the swing and the railing, effectively blocking Claire's view of the yard. He stood broadside to her, his hackles slightly raised. "Kodiak, move," Noah said, nudging the dog with his foot. Kodiak didn't budge. He let out a low, rumbling growl, a sound that vibrated through the porch floorboards. "Noah," Claire said, pulling her legs back. "Maybe we should go inside. He really doesn't want me out here." "I don't get it," Noah muttered, frustration bubbling up. He grabbed Kodiak's collar. "What is your problem today? You're acting crazy." He dragged the dog inside, forcing him into the laundry room and closing the half door. Kodiak paced in the small space, whining, his claws clicking frantically on the linoleum. "Sorry," Noah said, coming back to the living room. "I'll keep him put away for a bit." "It's fine," Claire said, though her hands were trembling slightly as she packed the camera away. Maybe I'll go rest for a bit. My ankle is throbbing again. Do you need more ice?" "No," she said quickly. "Just quiet. I'll just lie down in the guest room." The afternoon stretched out, hot and silent. Thomas was still gone. Noah busied himself with the indoor chores, sweeping the floors, dusting the mantel, trying to ignore the whining coming from the laundry room. Around 2 o'clock, Noah went to check on Kodiak. The dog was frantic. He had chewed at the doorframe, splintering the wood. When Noah opened the latch, Kodiak didn't jump on him. He bolted. He ran straight to the guest room door. It was closed. Kodiak sniffed the crack at the bottom, inhaling deeply. Then he turned to Noah and barked, a sharp, demanding sound. "Open it. She's sleeping, Kodiak. Leave her alone." But Kodiak wasn't listening. He began to scratch at the wood, his heavy paws digging into the finish. "Stop it," Noah hissed, grabbing the dog. Kodiak spun around, grabbed Noah's sleeve gently but firmly in his teeth, and pulled. He wasn't playing. He was leading. He pulled Noah toward the kitchen, then released him and ran back to the guest room door, looking back to see if the boy understood. Noah sighed. "Fine. You want water? Is that it?" He went to the kitchen to fill the bowl. On the floor, near the trash can, he saw something. It was a crumpled ball of paper. It must have fallen out of Claire's pocket or bag. Noah picked it up, intending to throw it away, but something about the stiffness of the paper made him pause. He smoothed it out. It wasn't a receipt. It was a printed topography map, a small section, cut from a larger sheet. It showed the bend of the river at the Narrows. But over the familiar contour lines, there were red markings, grids, numbers. Sector 4 Alpha, high density. Priority acquisition. Noah stared at it. Priority acquisition. He didn't know what it meant, not really, but the words felt cold. Like the language of the letters his dad got from the bank. A crash from the other room shattered the silence. Noah dropped the paper and ran. The door to the guest room was open. Kodiak had nudged the handle. The latch was old and loose, and had barged in. "Kodiak, get out of there," Noah yelled, running down the hall. He skidded to a stop in the doorway. Claire wasn't sleeping. She wasn't even on the bed. She was standing by the window, balancing on her good leg. In her hand was the satellite phone Noah had never seen. She looked terrified. But the real chaos was on the floor. Kodiak had found the waterproof bag, the one she never let out of her sight. He had dragged it from the corner where she had hidden it, under a pile of blankets. He had ripped the heavy zipper with his teeth, shaking the bag violently like he was killing a snake. The contents were spilled across the rug. There was the camera, yes, but there was other gear too. Metal stakes with orange flags, a laser rangefinder, a folded stack of large blueprints, and a thick file folder that had burst open. Noah stood frozen. His eyes moved over the debris. He saw a map. A big one. It was their ranch. He recognized the shape of the property line, the loop of the driveway, the square of the house, but the map was wrong. The house had a red X over it. The barn had an X. The north pasture was shaded in solid black, and stamped across the top of the file folder, in bold, aggressive letters, was a logo, a stylized red mountain with a pickaxe. Redstone Mining Corporation. Confidential. Mercer Property Assessment/Eviction Strategy. The air left the room. Noah looked from the papers to Claire. She lowered the phone slowly. Her face was paper white. The nature photographer was gone. The woman standing there looked cornered, guilty, and devastatingly efficient. "Noah," she whispered. "Noah, please, put the dog outside." Noah didn't move. He couldn't feel his legs. He felt like he was floating, like he had fallen off the cliff again. But this time, there was no rope. He walked into the room. Kodiak moved to his side, pressing his heavy body against Noah's leg, growling deep in his chest. A sound that said, "I told you. I told you." Noah knelt and picked up the top document. Subject, Thomas Mercer. Financial status, critical/insolvent. Leverage points, medical debt, widower status, child welfare. Objective, secure mineral rights via foreclosure or compelled sale. Noah read the words. Child welfare, leverage. He looked up at Claire. His eyes, usually so full of light, were dark holes of shock. "You're not a photographer," he said. His voice was small, flat. It sounded like a stranger's voice. "Noah, listen to me," Claire said, taking a step forward, wincing as her ankle protested. It's not what you think. I mean, it is, but it's complicated. I was sent here to survey, yes. But I didn't know. I didn't know about you. About your mom. You have a map of my house," Noah said, holding up the paper. His hand started to shake. "With an X on it. That means you want to tear it down." "It means the company wants the land," Claire said, her voice trembling. "The minerals underneath, they're worth millions, Noah. Your dad, he's drowning in debt. This could save him. If he sells." "You lied," Noah whispered. The betrayal hit him then, harder than any physical blow. The cooking. The stars. The petrified wood. She knew. The whole time she was eating my stew, she was planning to take her home. You lied about everything. You lied about the hawk. You lied about being lost. I didn't lie about saving me, Claire pleaded. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over. Noah, you saved my life. That changed things. I was trying to figure out how to tell you. I was trying to find a way to help you navigate this before the company sends the lawyers. You are the company, Noah said. He stood up, clutching the file to his chest. Get away from her, Kodiak, Noah commanded. His voice broke. Noah, wait, get out, Noah screamed. It was a child's scream, high and ragged, filled with the terror of a world collapsing. The sound of the front door opening slammed through the house. Heavy boots stomped down the hall. Noah. Thomas's voice. What's going on? Thomas appeared in the doorway, dusty and sun-beaten. He took in the scene in 1 second. The spilled bag, the crying woman, the growling dog. His son, shaking, holding a file folder like a shield. Dad, Noah choked out. He held the paper out. Look what she is. Thomas took the file. He looked at the logo. He scanned the leverage points. The silence that descended on the room was terrifying. It wasn't the silence of the desert. It was the silence of a bomb just before detonation. Thomas looked up slowly. His eyes were cold, dead things. The warmth he had shown Claire, the begrudging hospitality, the medical care, evaporated instantly. Redstone, Thomas said. The word tasted like poison. I wondered when you vultures would show up. I just didn't think you'd come limping onto my porch. Thomas, please, Claire said, leaning against the dresser for support. I'm a surveyor. That's my job. I came to map the deposit. But when I met Noah, when I saw what this place means, I haven't sent the final report. I haven't. You wrote down that I'm a widower, Thomas said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a shout. You wrote down my debt. You wrote down child welfare. He stepped forward, crumpling the paper in his fist. You were going to use my son against me, to take my land. I didn't write the strategy, Claire cried. That's corporate. I just verify the assets. My son is not an asset, Thomas snarled. He pointed to the door. Get out. Thomas, I can't drive, Claire said, panic rising. My ankle. I don't care if you have to crawl, Thomas said. You get out of my house. You get off my land. If you're not gone in 10 minutes, I'm calling the sheriff, and I'm filing charges for trespassing, fraud, and endangerment. Dad, Noah whispered, tears streaming down his face now. She showed me the stars. Thomas looked at his son, and the heartbreak on his face was agonizing. He reached out and pulled Noah behind him, shielding him from Claire. She didn't show you anything, son, Thomas said gently. She was just calculating the view. He turned back to Claire, his face hardening into granite. 10 minutes, or I drag you out myself. Thomas turned and walked Noah out of the room, leaving Claire alone with the wreckage of her cover story. 10 minutes later, there was no helicopter. There was no dramatic rescue. Just a black sedan, pulling up the long dust driveway. Claire had made the call on her satellite phone. Corporate extraction. They were always nearby. Noah stood at the living room window, watching through the screen. His chest felt hollowed out, scraped clean of trust. He watched Claire hobble out the front door. She had her bag slung over her shoulder, the survey stakes sticking out awkwardly. She paused at the bottom of the steps. She looked back at the house. She looked at the window where Noah was standing. She raised a hand, a hesitant, apologetic wave. Her face was streaked with tears. Noah didn't wave back. He let the curtain fall. The driver of the sedan, a man in a suit that looked ridiculous in the desert heat, got out and opened the door for her. He tossed her bag in the trunk with careless disregard. As the car turned around, kicking up a cloud of red dust that swallowed the view, Noah felt a heavy weight lean against his leg. Kodiak. The dog didn't growl. He didn't bark. He simply pressed his side against Noah's leg, solid and warm. He licked Noah's hand, one long, rough stroke of his tongue. I'm here, the dog was saying. I'm true. Noah sank to his knees, wrapping his arms around the dog's neck, burying his face in the thick copper fur. He sobbed, the dry, racking sobs of a boy learning the hardest lesson of his life. His father came in from the porch, carrying the rifle he had cleaned earlier. He didn't say anything. He just locked the door, slid the deadbolt home, and went to the kitchen to throw the stew leftovers into the trash. The house was safe again, but it felt smaller. The emptiness where the guest had been was filled with a new, sharper fear. As the black sedan disappeared, Noah thought the betrayal was over. But he was wrong. In the chaos of her departure, Claire had left something behind, deliberately. Tucked inside Noah's geology textbook on the coffee table was a small USB drive with a sticky note attached. It didn't have a code or a lock. It just had one word written in hasty scrawl. Truth. Noah stared at it, the hum of the computer in the study calling to him. If he plugged it in, he would see what Redstone was really planning. And he would realize that Claire wasn't just a surveyor. She was the only witness to a crime that had already begun. The silence that fell over the Mercer Ranch in the wake of Claire Donnelly's departure was not the peaceful silence of the desert. It was a pressurized stillness, heavy and suffocating, like the air before a lightning strike. 2 days had passed since the black sedan had swallowed the woman who had sat at their table and lied to their faces, but the ghost of her presence remained. It lingered in the faint scent of her shampoo that still clung to the guest room pillow, in the bruised patch of grass where her rental car had turned around, and most violently, in the small silver USB drive that sat on Noah's nightstand. Noah hadn't touched it. He hadn't plugged it in. He had stared at the words scrawled on the yellow sticky note, truth, until the letters seemed to blur and dance. He wanted to hate her. He did hate her. The betrayal felt like a physical hollow in his chest, a raw space where his trust used to be. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the file folder with the red X over his home. But beneath the anger was a confusing, jagged shard of missing her. The way she had looked at his photos, the way she had listened. That confusion made him sick to his stomach, so he left the drive alone, treating it like an unexploded ordnance he had found in the wash. Thomas Mercer had retreated into a frantic, terrifying productivity. He didn't speak much. He spent the daylight hours patrolling the fence line with a ferocity Noah had never seen, repairing brakes that didn't really need fixing, checking the locks on the gates 3 times. The rifle, usually kept in the safe, now leaned permanently by the back door. Thomas wasn't ranching anymore. He was fortifying. On the morning of the 3rd day, the wind shifted. It came from the south, hot and dry, carrying the smell of ozone and asphalt. Noah was on the front porch, shelling peas into a metal bowl. It was a mindless task. The pop-snap of the pods, the only rhythm in the heat. Kodiak lay at his feet, panting in the shade. The dog had been unsettled for 48 hours, pacing the perimeter of the house at night, sleeping with one eye open. Suddenly, Kodiak stopped panting. He lifted his head, his ears swiveling toward the long dirt road that snaked toward the highway. He didn't growl, not yet. He stood up, his body stiffening into a posture of absolute alertness. The fur along his spine rose in a slow, bristling ridge. "Dad," Noah called out, not looking away from the road. Thomas emerged from the barn instantly, wiping grease from his hands. He saw the dog's posture and walked to the porch, his eyes narrowing against the glare. A dust cloud was rising in the distance. It wasn't the erratic, billowing cloud of a tourist lost on the backroads, nor the heavy, slow cloud of a cattle truck. It was fast, precise, and approaching with intent. As the vehicle drew closer, the sun glinted off black metal. It was a Lincoln Navigator, pristine and polished, looking utterly alien against the backdrop of sagebrush and red dust. It moved over the washboard road with an arrogant smoothness, its suspension swallowing the ruts that usually rattled the Mercer's old pickup to pieces. "Go inside, Noah," Thomas said quietly. "I'm staying," Noah said. He put the bowl of peas down. He wasn't a child to be sent to his room, not after what he'd seen in that folder. Thomas looked at him, saw the set of his jaw, and didn't argue. He reached inside the door and grabbed the rifle. He didn't raise it, just held it loose in one hand, the barrel pointed at the floorboards. "Stay behind me, and keep a hand on the dog." The SUV pulled up to the house and stopped. The engine cut, and the silence rushed back in, louder than before. The tinted windows were black mirrors, reflecting the warped image of the ranch house and the 2 figures standing on the porch. The doors opened. 2 men stepped out. The first, emerging from the back seat, was a man who looked like he had been cut from a magazine page and pasted into the wrong landscape. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than the Mercer's truck, a crisp white shirt, and no tie. He was in his 50s, silver-haired, tanned, with teeth that were too white, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. This was a man who lived in air conditioning. The second man, the driver, was different. He was younger, massive, with a shaved head and a neck as thick as a tree stump. He wore a suit too, but it strained at the shoulders. He wore sunglasses, and he moved with the predatory coiled grace of someone who knew exactly how to hurt people. He scanned the porch, the barn, the windows, checking angles. "Mr. Mercer," the silver-haired man called out, spreading his hands as if greeting an old friend. "Beautiful country you have out here. Truly spectacular." "You're trespassing," Thomas said. His voice was flat, carrying no inflection. "Turn around." "I'm afraid it's not that simple, Thomas. May I call you Thomas?" The man walked to the gate of the yard, unlatched it, and stepped through. He ignored the rifle. "I'm Victor Ashford, CEO of Redstone Mining." "And this is Mr. Webb, my head of security." Webb didn't speak. He just stood 5 paces behind his boss, hands clasped loosely in front of him, watching Kodiak. Kodiak let out a sound that vibrated through Noah's hand on his collar, a deep, guttural rumble that felt like thunder underground. The dog lowered his head, his lips pulling back to reveal the full length of his canines. He wasn't warning them to stay back. He was calculating the distance to Webb's throat. "I know who you are," Thomas said. "You're the man who sent a spy into my home to eat my food and lie to my son." Ashford stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He looked up, his expression one of pained sympathy. "Miss Donnelly." "Yes, a regrettable necessity. We find that direct approaches can sometimes cause unnecessary alarm. Claire is very good at what she does. She captures the essence of a place." "She mapped my land for demolition," Noah said. The words burst out of him before he could stop them. Ashford looked at Noah. For a second, the mask slipped, and Noah saw a cold reptilian indifference in the man's eyes. "She mapped the assets, young man. There is a difference." Ashford reached into his jacket pocket. Thomas tightened his grip on the rifle. But Ashford only pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. "We're not here to fight, Thomas," Ashford said, stepping up onto the first step. "We're here to settle this." Generously, he held out the envelope. Thomas didn't take it. "Settle what? I own this land. The deed is in the safe. My grandfather homesteaded this place in 1948. You have no claim here." "Ah," Ashford said, a small, patronizing smile playing on his lips. "You own the surface rights. That is true. The dirt, the grass, the lovely little house. But you don't own what's underneath." He tossed the envelope onto the porch swing. It landed with a heavy slap. "In 1987, Ashford continued, his voice smooth as oil, "your father, Elias Mercer, was going through a difficult patch. Drought years, you remember? He took a loan from a holding company called Great Basin Instability. As collateral, he signed over the mineral rights to Section 4. This section." "That's a lie," Thomas spat. "My father never took a loan he didn't pay back, and he would never sign away rights. He hated mining companies." "Desperation makes men do strange things," Ashford said with a shrug. "Great Basin was acquired by a subsidiary of Redstone 10 years ago. We've recently audited our assets and discovered that your property sits atop one of the largest deposits of high-grade vanadium and uranium in the state. Strategic minerals, Thomas. Vital for national security. Vital for the future." "I don't care what's under the dirt," Thomas said. "You're not touching it. The law says otherwise," Ashford said. The smile vanished. "That envelope contains a copy of the 1987 agreement with your father's signature. It also contains an eviction notice. Pursuant to the Mineral Development Act, we require access to the surface to extract the subsurface assets. Since open-pit mining is the required method, the surface structures, this house, that barn, are incompatible with operations." Noah felt the blood drain from his face. Open pit. They wanted to turn the ranch into a hole. A crater. "You have 30 days to vacate," Ashford said, checking his watch as if he were scheduling a lunch. "However, Redstone is a benevolent neighbor. We are offering a settlement. $150,000. It will cover your outstanding medical debts. We know about the oncology bills, Thomas. We know about the second mortgage, and give you a fresh start. Somewhere else." 150? Thomas laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "This land is worth 10 times that. And the debt, that's none of your damn business. The land is worth nothing if you don't own the rights to use it," Ashford countered coolly. "And the debt makes you vulnerable. If we go to court, we will bury you in litigation for 5 years. You'll lose the house to the bank long before a judge ever sees your case. We will bleed you dry, Thomas. Or you can take the check, pack your truck, and walk away clean. Get off my property," Thomas said. He raised the barrel of the rifle an inch. "Now." Ashford didn't flinch. He looked at the gun with mild amusement. "Threatening a corporate officer with a deadly weapon. Marcus, make a note of that." Marcus Webb stepped forward. He moved like a tank. He took off his sunglasses, revealing eyes that were flat and dead. He looked at Thomas, then he looked at Noah. "Smart kid," Webb said. His voice was like grinding gravel. "Found the lady in the canyon. Climbed down." Noah stared at him, gripping Kodiak's collar with both hands. "Canyons are dangerous places," Webb continued, holding Noah's gaze. "Lots of loose rock. Steep drops. Accidents happen all the time. Especially to kids who play where they don't belong." The threat hung in the hot air, naked and brutal. Thomas stepped in front of Noah, blocking Webb's view. The veins in his neck were bulging. "Are you threatening my son?" "I'm giving safety advice," Webb said, cracking his knuckles. "We're leaving," Ashford announced, sensing the volatility was peaking. He turned back to the car. Read the papers, Thomas. Consult a lawyer. Oh wait, you can't afford one. My mistake. Ashford slid into the back seat. Webb stared at Thomas for one more second, a silent promise of violence, then turned and got into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life. The Lincoln reversed, turned, and sped away, trailing a cloud of dust that coated Noah's face and tasted of ash. For a long time, neither of them moved. The silence returned, but now it felt broken. The ranch didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It felt like a target. Thomas slowly lowered the rifle. He leaned it against the railing and sat heavily on the swing, right next to the envelope. He looked old. Older than he had looked even at the funeral. He picked up the envelope and tore it open. He pulled out the stack of documents. Noah watched him. Dad? Is it true? About Grandpa? Thomas stared at a photocopy of a yellowed document. He traced the signature at the bottom. Elias Mercer. It looked like his father's handwriting. The loop of the M, the sharp R. I don't know, Thomas whispered. His voice trembled. It looks like his hand. But he never told me. He never said a word. Maybe he forged it, Noah said desperately. Maybe they faked it. Maybe, Thomas said. He looked at the eviction notice. Vacate by August 15th. But to prove that, Noah, that takes experts. Handwriting analysis. Forensic accountants. Lawyers who charge $500 an hour. We have. He pulled his wallet out and opened it. It was thin. We have nothing. We have the land, Noah said. We have the truth. The truth costs money, son, Thomas said. He dropped the papers on the floor. He put his head in his hands. Noah had never seen his father give up. He had seen him grieve. He had seen him exhausted, but he had never seen him defeated. It scared him more than Webb's dead eyes. Are we going to lose everything? Noah asked. His voice was small, a child's voice again. Thomas looked up. He looked at the red cliffs, the barn, the garden his wife had planted. Tears tracked through the dust on his face. I don't know, son, Thomas said. I honest to God don't know. By afternoon the news had spread. In the rural desert, bad news traveled faster than radio waves, carried by phone lines and neighborly concern. Around 4 o'clock, an old Ford pickup rattled up the driveway. It was painted a faded turquoise, with a bumper sticker that read Native Land. Sam Begay stepped out. Sam was a Hopi elder who sat on the local tribal council. He had been a friend of Noah's grandfather. He walked with a cane, his long gray hair tied back in a neat bun, his face a map of deep wrinkles and kindness. Thomas met him in the yard. They didn't shake hands. They just nodded. I heard, Sam said. Redstone. They were here, Thomas said, kicking at the dirt. Dropped a bomb on my porch. They've been busy, Sam said. He leaned on his cane, looking toward the horizon. They hit the Miller place last month. Same story. Old debt, mineral rights, eviction. Millers are gone. Living in a trailer in Gallup. Noah, sitting on the porch steps with Kodiak, felt a chill. The Millers had been there for 50 years. They say Grandpa signed the rights away in '87, Thomas said. Sam spat on the ground. Elias wouldn't sign a birthday card without reading the fine print. He hated the mining companies. Said they raped the Mother Earth. They have a document, Sam. Paper lies, Sam said. The white man's paper has always lied. But the courts, they love the paper. Can the council help? Thomas asked. It was hard for him to ask. Noah could see the strain in his jaw. Sam sighed, shaking his head slowly. We can file a protest. We can claim the water table will be poisoned, which it will be. But our lawyers are overwhelmed. We're fighting 5 suits right now over water rights. Redstone has an army. We have a few brave warriors with slingshots. Sam reached out and put a hand on Thomas's shoulder. We will stand with you, Thomas. We will make noise. But I cannot promise we can stop the machines. They have bought the politicians, the judges, maybe even the history. Sam looked at Noah. The boy. He is strong. He's had to be, Thomas said. The canyon knows him, Sam said enigmatically. Sometimes, the land fights back. But you must be careful. These men, they have no spirit. They only have hunger. When Sam left, the sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the yard. The visit, meant to be comforting, had only confirmed the scale of the nightmare. They weren't just fighting a greedy landlord. They were fighting a machine that had been eating families like theirs for decades. That night, the house was unbearable. The air conditioning hummed, but it couldn't cool the heat of the anxiety radiating from Thomas. He sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the documents, a calculator, and a bottle of whiskey he hadn't opened in years. He was doing math that didn't add up. Noah lay in his bed upstairs, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily in the dark. He felt a deep, twisting knot of emotions. He hated Claire. He hated her for sitting in that chair, for laughing at his jokes, for making him feel like he mattered, all while she was planning this execution. He hated her for the X on the map, but he also hated that he missed her. He rolled over and looked at the nightstand. The moonlight hit the silver USB drive. Truth. That's what the note said. Why would she leave it? If she was the enemy, if she was just a corporate spy, why leave a breadcrumb? Was it a taunt? Or was it an apology? Don't touch it, Noah whispered to himself. Dad said to leave it alone. But his dad was downstairs, drowning in paper lies. His dad didn't know what to do. His dad had said, I don't know. If the adults didn't know, then the rules didn't apply anymore. Kodiak was sleeping on the rug beside the bed. As Noah sat up, the dog's ears twitched. It's okay, boy, Noah whispered. He reached out and picked up the drive. It was cool to the touch. It felt heavy, heavier than plastic and metal should be. He slipped out of bed and walked to his desk. His computer was an old desktop his dad had refurbished for schoolwork. It hummed to life, the blue light of the monitor illuminating the room in a ghostly glow. Noah hesitated. His hand hovered over the USB port. Accidents happen in canyons, the man with the dead eyes had said. Noah thought about the Narrows. He thought about the rope. He thought about how Claire had looked when she talked about her daughter Emma. That pain in her eyes, that hadn't been fake. You can't fake the look of a parent who has buried a child. Noah knew that look. He saw it in the mirror every morning, on his own father's face. Show me, Noah whispered. He jammed the drive into the port. The computer chimed. A folder window popped up. There was only one file. A video file. Labeled simply, watch_me.mp4. Noah clicked it. The screen went black for a second, then flared to life. The video was shaky at first, the camera being adjusted. Then, Claire's face filled the frame. She wasn't in the ranch house. She was in a sterile white room, a hotel room or an apartment. She looked terrible. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair messy. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She was whispering, glancing at the door behind her, as if she expected it to be kicked in. Noah. The video, Claire whispered. Her voice was tinny through the cheap computer speakers. If you're watching this, then I'm gone. And you probably hate me. You should hate me. She took a shaky breath, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. I can't undo what I did. I surveyed the land. I sent the data. But I found something else. Something they didn't want me to find. Something they didn't want you to know. She held up a piece of paper to the camera. It was old, yellowed. It looked like the document Ashford had shown Thomas, but different. They told your dad his father signed the rights away in '87, Claire said, her voice gaining a desperate intensity. But look at the date on this stamp. Look at the witness signature. This is the original draft from the county archives, the one they thought they burned. She leaned closer to the lens. Your grandfather didn't sign it, Noah. He refused. The signature on their copy. It's a trace. A forgery. But proving it is impossible without the original. And I found where they hid the original. Noah leaned in, his heart hammering against his ribs so hard it hurt. It's not in a vault, Claire whispered. It's still on the land. Your grandfather was smarter than them. He buried the proof. He buried it deep, where only a Mercer would know where to look. In the video files on this drive, there are coordinates. Audio logs from your grandfather, I recovered from the archives. He talks about a safety deposit box made of stone. A loud bang on the door in the video made Claire jump. She looked terrified. I have to go, she hurried. They're coming, Noah. The minerals aren't just under the ranch. The deposit runs under the river, under the Narrows. If they mine it, they won't just destroy your house. They'll poison the water for 100 miles. They'll kill the canyon. She looked directly into the lens, and for a second, it felt like she was in the room with him. Be brave, Noah. Be the boy who climbed down the cliff. Save your home. The screen went black. Noah sat in the dark, the hum of the computer fan the only sound. He wasn't crying anymore. The fear that had been paralyzing him was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. They had lied. They had forged the papers. And his grandfather, the man who taught his father how to be a man, had left a breadcrumb trail. A safety deposit box, made of stone. Noah looked at Kodiak. The dog was sitting up now, watching him. We have a job to do, Noah whispered. Noah reached for his mouse to open the coordinate files, his hand steady for the first time in days. But as the map loaded on his screen, a sudden, blinding light flooded his bedroom from the outside. The roar of a heavy engine shattered the night silence, far louder than a car. Noah ran to the window. Hovering above the ranch house, blindingly bright, was a drone, industrial, military grade, with a red camera eye fixated right on his window. Redstone wasn't just waiting for the eviction date. They were watching, and they knew he had plugged in the drive. The air in the Phoenix corporate apartment was not air, it was processed climate. It was scrubbed, chilled to a precise 68 degrees, and smelled of absolutely nothing. It was the smell of money, of efficiency, of a world where dust and heat and consequences were filtered out before they could touch the skin. Claire Donnelly stood in the center of the living room, a space dominated by chrome, glass, and white leather. It was on the 24th floor of the Redstone Tower, offering a panoramic view of the sprawling city grid, a sea of lights shimmering in the desert darkness. It was beautiful, in the way a microchip is beautiful, cold, logical, and dead. On the glass coffee table, a bottle of Dom Perignon sat in a silver bucket of melting ice. Beside it lay her company phone, its screen pulsing with a soft, rhythmic light. Notification, deposit received. $250,000. Notification, voicemail from Victor Ashford. Claire stared at the phone. She was wearing a silk blouse and tailored slacks, the uniform of the victor. She had done her job. She had gone into the wilderness, extracted the data, confirmed the assets, and delivered the kill shot to a family that didn't have the resources to fight back. In the corporate world, she was a star. She was the closer. She reached for the champagne flute she had poured 10 minutes ago. The bubbles had stopped rising. She took a sip. It tasted like vinegar. It tasted like the dust of the Mercer Ranch. She turned away from the window and limped toward the bathroom. Her ankle was still wrapped in the ace bandage Thomas Mercer had given her, a throbbing reminder of the lie she had lived. Every step was a punishment, and she welcomed the pain. It was the only real thing in this glass box. She walked into the bathroom, the lights triggering automatically, harsh, unflattering fluorescent strips that left no shadow to hide in. She gripped the edge of the marble sink and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger. She was polished, her hair clean and blow-dried, her skin scrubbed of the canyon's red dirt. But the eyes were hollowed out. They were the eyes of a creature that had chewed off its own leg to escape a trap, only to realize it had bled out in the process. "Congratulations," she whispered to the reflection. Her voice sounded thin, tinny against the tile. "You won." She opened the medicine cabinet. Behind the rows of high-end skincare products and prescription sleep aids, tucked into the far corner, was a small, velvet pouch. Claire's hand trembled as she reached for it. She hadn't opened this pouch in 4 years. She usually kept it buried in her suitcase, a radioactive artifact she carried but dared not touch. She undid the drawstring and slid the photograph out. It was a candid shot, slightly out of focus. A girl, 11 years old, sitting on the hood of a car, eating an ice cream cone. She had messy brown hair, a gap in her smile, and eyes that were hazel, bright, and full of a terrifying amount of trust. Emma. Claire's breath hitched, a jagged sound that felt like tearing fabric. Emma would have been 15 now. She would be worrying about high school, about boys, about driving. Driving. The memory didn't ask permission to enter. It kicked the door down. Flashback. It was a Tuesday, a mundane, sunny Tuesday in Seattle. The smell of rain on asphalt. The interior of the Volvo smelled of Emma's strawberry lip gloss and the lukewarm coffee in Claire's cup holder. "Mom, look at that dog." Emma was pointing out the window, laughing. "Just a second, sweetie," Claire said. Her phone was pressed to her ear. It was the vice president of operations. A crisis with a survey in Alaska. A deadline. "Mom, seriously, it's wearing a raincoat." "Emma, quiet, please. Mommy has to take this." Claire's voice was sharp, stressed. She was distracted. She was looking at the dashboard clock, calculating the time to the office, calculating the data points for the call. The light at the intersection turned green. "So the yield projections are off by 10%? Claire asked into the phone, her foot lifting off the brake. She pressed the gas. She didn't look left. She was looking at the spreadsheet in her mind. "Mom!" Emma screamed. The sound wasn't a screech of tires. It was louder. It was the roar of a heavy engine, a delivery truck, running the red light. Claire turned her head. She saw the grill. It was massive. It filled the window. The impact was a thunderclap that shattered the world. The spinning. The glass flying like diamonds. The silence that followed. And then, the worst sound of all. "Emma." Silence. "Emma." Just the hiss of the radiator. Just the voice of the VP on the phone, still talking about yield projections, tinny and small on the floor mat. "Claire, are you there? We need those numbers." End flashback. Claire gripped the sink so hard her fingernails threatened to snap. She gasped for air, but the bathroom felt like it was underwater. 4 years. She had spent 4 years running from that intersection. She had taken the job at Redstone because it kept her moving, kept her in remote places where there were no intersections, no traffic lights, No school runs. She had buried herself in work, becoming a machine of efficiency. Because machines don't feel guilt. Machines don't have daughters. She looked at the photo of Emma. Then, in her mind's eye, the image shifted. The official report she had submitted 2 hours ago. The one that legitimized the theft of the land. It wasn't Emma sitting on the hood of the car. It was Noah sitting on the porch swing. The hazel eyes were the same. The trust was the same. The vulnerability of a child looking at an adult and believing that they are safe. Oh God, Claire moaned, her knees giving way. She slid down the cabinet until she hit the cold tile floor. She had done it again. She hadn't killed Noah with a car. She had killed him with a map. She had looked at him, a boy who had saved her life, a boy who had cooked her stew and shown her the stars, and she had chosen the phone call. She had chosen the deadline. She had chosen the yield projections. She was the truck. She sat on the floor of the $1 million apartment, surrounded by the trappings of her success, and she wept. It wasn't the polite, silent crying of the last few years. It was a guttural, ugly heaving that shook her ribcage. It was the sound of a dam breaking. She thought of Thomas Mercer standing on the porch, his rifle in hand, protecting his son. She thought of the X on the map. She thought of the way Noah had looked at her through the window, not with anger, but with a devastation that was so much worse. I can't, she whispered to the empty room. I can't be this. She looked at Emma's photo in her hand. The girl in the picture seemed to be looking right at her, the smile fading, the eyes waiting. What are you going to do, Mom? Claire wiped her face with her sleeve, the silk stained dark. She stood up. The movement was difficult, her ankles screaming, but she didn't care. A cold, hard clarity was settling over her, freezing the tears on her cheeks. She walked out of the bathroom and into the living room. She picked up her laptop, a sleek, black corporate issue machine. She sat on the white leather sofa and opened it. The screen glowed with the Redstone logo. She typed in her password, access granted. She wasn't just a surveyor. She was a senior field analyst. She had level 4 clearance. She had access to the raw data, the internal comms, the strategy folders that the legal team kept encrypted. She navigated to the Mercer file. There it was, but there was another folder. A folder labeled archive_1987_do_not_delete. She had found it by accident while digging through the digitized county records Redstone had acquired and sealed. She clicked it open. The document on the screen was a scan of a mineral rights transfer. It was dated August 14, 1987. It was signed by Elias Mercer. But Claire knew how to look at documents. She zoomed in on the signature. The pixels were jagged. The ink flow was too uniform. It was a digital composite, pasted from another document. She opened the metadata. Created, June 12, 2024. Author M. Webb. You bastards, she hissed. She kept digging. She found the email chains. From versus Ashford to legal subject. Mercer obstacle. The grandfather refused to sign. The original deed is missing. If we can't find it, we manufacture the chain of custody. The deposit is worth $400 million. Do whatever it takes to clear the surface. If the family resists, lean on the debt. If they still resist, initiate safety protocols in the canyon. Safety protocols. That meant sabotage. That meant making the land dangerous. Claire felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. They weren't just thieves. They were willing to be murderers. And she had been their scout. She looked at the clock. 7:15 p.m. If she did what she was thinking of doing, the $250,000 bonus would be clawed back. Her career would be incinerated. She would be blacklisted from every mining and geological firm in the world. She could face criminal charges for corporate espionage. She could go to prison. She looked at the champagne bottle. Then she looked at the photo of Emma she had propped up against the laptop screen. I can't bring you back, Claire whispered to the girl who would never grow up. I can't fix that intersection. She reached out and touched the screen. But I can save him. She pulled a heavy, encrypted hard drive from her bag. She plugged it in. She selected the Mercer folder. She selected the email chains. She selected the entire Project Red Rock directory. Right-click copy, paste to external drive. The progress bar appeared. Estimated time, 4 minutes. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Redstone's IT department monitored large data transfers. If they saw a level 4 analyst downloading terabytes of sensitive data to an external drive, alarms would trigger. 15%. She opened her email client. She composed a new message. To Investigative Desk at azrepublic.com, Attorney General at az.gov, Enforcement at epa.gov, Subject, Whistleblower Evidence, Redstone Mining, Fraud and Endangerment. She didn't attach the files, too big. She attached a summary. A roadmap of where the bodies were buried. 35%. Her phone rang. She jumped, her heart seizing. It was Ashford. She stared at the screen. He knew. Or he suspected. She let it ring. 60%. The phone stopped ringing. Then, a ping. A text message. Ashford, IT flagged a large transfer on your terminal. Everything okay, Claire? She typed back, her fingers flying. Just backing up the raw image files from the trip. My laptop is acting glitchy. Don't want to lose the marketing shots. A pause. A terrifying 10-second pause where the cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Ashford, good thinking. We need those for the press release tomorrow. Great work again, Claire. She let out a breath that was half scream. He bought it. For now. 90%. 99%. Transfer complete. She ejected the drive. She shoved it into her pocket. Then, she opened a new email. To V. Ashford subject, resignation. Victor, I quit. Keep the money. You're gonna need it for the lawyers. Claire. Send. She snapped the laptop shut. The room suddenly felt too small. The walls were closing in. They would come for her. Ashford wasn't a man who let loose ends dangle. If he read that email, if he checked the logs and saw what she actually took, Webb would be on a plane within the hour. She ran to the bedroom. She grabbed her suitcase and dumped it on the bed. She threw the silk blouses on the floor. She threw the tailored slacks into the corner. She dug to the bottom. She pulled out her worn Carhartt pants, her flannel shirt, her heavy hiking boots. She stripped off the corporate skin. She pulled on the pants, wincing as she navigated the ankle brace. She buttoned the flannel. It felt rough and real. She laced the boots tight. She looked in the mirror one last time. The woman staring back wasn't polished. She looked wild. She looked dangerous. She looked like a mother who had found her cubs. Okay, she breathed. Okay. She grabbed her satellite phone, the hard drive, and the photo of Emma. She shoved them into her canvas field bag. She didn't take the camera. She didn't take the clothes. She didn't take the champagne. She walked to the door. She paused, her hand on the latch. She was walking away from a life of safety and wealth. She was walking into a war with a billion-dollar corporation. She was walking back to a man who had thrown her out and a boy who hated her. Good, she said. She opened the door and walked out into the sterile hallway, leaving the apartment empty, save for the ghost of the woman she used to be. The elevator ride down to the garage took 40 seconds. It felt like 40 years. Claire limped to her truck. Not the rental, but her own beat-up Toyota Tacoma that she kept in storage in the city. It started with a reliable, throaty rumble. She peeled out of the garage, hitting the ramp fast. The city lights blurred past her window. She hit the I-17 north. The sign overhead read, Flagstaff, 140 miles. 4 hours. She pressed the accelerator. The truck surged forward. She wasn't running away this time. For the first time in 4 years, she was running towards something. The city fell behind her, replaced by the encroaching dark of the desert. The stars came out, the same stars Noah had shown her. Orion. Cassiopeia. The map that never changed. She reached into her bag and pulled out the satellite phone. She needed to warn them. She needed to tell Thomas that the eviction notice was just the first wave. She dialed the Mercer landline number she had memorized from the file. Ring, ring, ring. Come on, Thomas. Pick up. Ring, ring, click. Hello. It wasn't Thomas. It was Noah. His voice sounded small and scared. Noah, Claire cried, gripping the wheel. Noah, listen to me. It's Claire. Don't hang up. You. Noah's voice hardened. Why are you calling? Dad said. I know what your dad said. Noah, listen. The USB drive I left. Did you find it? Silence. Noah, the drive in your textbook. Did you find it? I have it, Noah whispered. I'm looking at it right now. Good. Don't open the map file yet, Claire said, her eyes scanning the rearview mirror. Headlights were appearing behind her. Fast ones. Noah, listen carefully. The mineral deposit isn't just under the house. It's under the river. If they blast, the whole cliff comes down. Do you understand? The Narrows. Where we were, it will all collapse. What? Noah sounded horrified. I'm coming back, Claire said. I have the proof. The real proof. But you have to get your dad. You have to get him to the safe box. Your grandfather. The line went dead. Static. Noah? Claire shouted. Noah. She looked at the phone. No signal. That wasn't right. It was a satellite phone. It worked everywhere. Unless someone was jamming the signal locally. She looked in the rearview mirror again. The headlights behind her hadn't passed. There were 2 sets, large SUVs. They were matching her speed. She changed lanes. They changed lanes. She sped up to 80. They sped up. Claire's blood ran cold. Ashford hadn't bought the excuse. Or maybe the glitchy laptop story hadn't fooled the IT guys for long. They weren't sending lawyers this time. She looked at the passenger seat where the hard drive sat. The evidence that could bring down Redstone. She slammed the truck into 5th gear, pushing the needle toward 90. The desert rushed by. A black void on either side. "You want a war?" she whispered, her eyes locked on the hunters in the mirror. "Come and get it." As Claire pushed the old truck to its limit, fighting to keep the gap between her and the pursuing SUVs, she didn't know that the signal jammer wasn't just affecting her phone. It was a localized blackout bubble moving with the pursuit. But back at the ranch, Noah wasn't looking at a black screen. He was looking at something far more terrifying. The watch_me video had ended, and a new window had opened on his computer, a live feed. It wasn't a webcam. It was a security camera view from inside the Redstone server room. And on the screen, a line of code was executing, glowing ominous red. Remote asset liquidation, initiated. Target, Mercer Ranch gas line. Noah smelled it before he understood it, the faint, rotten egg scent of propane leaking into the house. The sound of a home dying is not a loud crash, but a series of small, suffocating rustles. It is the sound of packing tape ripping across cardboard. It is the hollow thud of books being stacked into boxes, leaving clean, rectangular ghosts on the dusty shelves where they had rested for 20 years. It is the silence of a phone that has stopped ringing, because there is no one left to call. 1 week had passed since the Lincoln Navigator had rolled away, leaving the eviction notice like a crater in the center of the Mercer life. 7 days of a slow, grinding suffocation. Noah sat on the floor of the living room, his knees pulled to his chest. The room, usually warm with the clutter of living, was becoming a skeleton. The geology books were packed. The rug where Kodiak liked to sleep was rolled up and leaned against the wall like a dead soldier. The air in the house was stale, tainted by the lingering phantom smell of propane. They had survived the gas leak. Thomas had found it that night. The regulator valve on the exterior tank had been wrenched open. The safety seal snapped. He had shut it off minutes before a spark from the compressor could have turned the ranch into a fireball. But the knowledge of it, the intent of it, had changed Thomas. He wasn't just a rancher anymore. He was a man under siege. Thomas walked into the room, carrying a stack of legal files he had printed from the library in town. He looked gaunt. The skin was pulled tight over his cheekbones, and his eyes were red-rimmed from sleepless nights spent patrolling the perimeter with the rifle. "Sam called," Thomas said, his voice scratching against the silence. "The tribal council filed the injunction. The judge denied it this morning, said there's insufficient evidence of ancestral claim to block the mineral survey." Noah looked up. "So that's it? We just leave?" Thomas dropped the files onto the bare coffee table. They slid across the wood, hitting the edge with a defeatist slap. "We don't have the money for an appeal, Noah. I talked to that lawyer in Flagstaff. He wants $5,000 just to read the brief. We have $400 in the checking account." "But the drive," Noah said, his voice rising. "The video," Claire said. "Don't say her name," Thomas snapped. The anger was sudden and sharp, a lash of a whip. He took a breath, forcing his shoulders down. "That video is inadmissible, Noah. It's a digital file from an anonymous source. Without the original document she talked about, it's just a ghost story. And we can't go digging for buried treasure while Redstone has drones watching our every move." He pointed to the window. The sky was empty now, but they both knew the drone returned every evening, a buzzing red eye in the twilight, reminding them that they were tenants in their own lives. "Finish packing the kitchen," Thomas said, his voice dull again. "We need to be out by Tuesday." Noah stood up, his legs heavy. He hated the boxes. He hated the surrender. He walked toward the kitchen, Kodiak trailing behind him. The dog was the only one who hadn't accepted defeat. Kodiak still paced the house with his hackles raised, checking the doors, growling at the wind. He knew the pack was threatened, and he was waiting for the fight. Then, the sound came. It wasn't the high-pitched whine of the drone. It wasn't the smooth purr of the Lincoln Navigator. It was the throat-clearing rattle of a diesel engine, straining against the incline of the driveway. A heavy, mechanical chug that sounded like rocks in a blender. Thomas froze. He looked at the front door. "Is that the mover?" Noah asked. "Movers aren't coming until Monday," Thomas said. He moved with terrifying speed. He crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbing the rifle from its place by the door. He jacked around into the chamber. Clack, clack, a sound that made Noah flinch. "Stay here," Thomas commanded. "Keep the dog inside." "Dad, wait." But Thomas was already out the door, the screen slamming behind him. Noah didn't stay. He couldn't. He grabbed Kodiak's collar and dragged him to the window. Outside, the afternoon sun was blinding. A truck was pulling up to the gate, not a rental, and not a corporate car. It was a battered, dust-caked Toyota Tacoma, dark gray, with a cracked windshield and mudguards hanging by a thread. It looked like it had been driven through hell and back. The truck skidded to a halt 10 yards from the porch. Steam hissed from the grill. Thomas stood at the top of the steps, the rifle shouldered, aimed directly at the driver's side windshield. "Get out!" Thomas roared. "Hands where I can see them." The driver's door groaned open. A boot hit the dirt. A heavy, scarred hiking boot, not a dress shoe. Then a leg in torn canvas pants. Claire Donnelly stepped out. She didn't look like the woman who had sat in their kitchen a week ago. The corporate polish had been sandblasted away. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, messy knot, matted with sweat. Her face was pale, devoid of makeup, revealing dark bruises of exhaustion under her eyes. She wore a flannel shirt that was stained with coffee and grease. She looked wild. She looked like she had aged 10 years in 7 days. She didn't raise her hands. She just stood there, leaning against the door of her truck, breathing hard, staring down the barrel of the gun. "I said, get off my property," Thomas yelled, his finger tightening on the trigger guard. "I swear to God, I will put a bullet in that engine block." "You should," Claire rasped. Her voice was wrecked, dry as the canyon floor. "But you might want to see what's in the bed of the truck first." "I don't want anything from you except your back," Thomas spat. "You have 3 seconds. 1. Dad, stop." Noah burst out onto the porch, unable to help himself. Kodiak surged past him, running down the steps. "Noah, get back." Thomas screamed, but Kodiak didn't attack. The dog ran to Claire, skidding to a halt 3 feet from her. He stretched his neck out, sniffing the air around her legs. He smelled the sweat, the fear, the adrenaline. He smelled the truth. He didn't growl. He let out a short, sharp woof and looked back at Thomas, his tail giving a single, hesitant wag. Claire looked at the dog, then up at Noah. Her eyes were swimming with tears. She refused to shed. "Hi, Noah. You came back," Noah whispered, gripping the porch railing. "I told you I would," she said. She looked at Thomas. "I'm not here to apologize, Thomas. Apologies are cheap. I'm here to fix it." "Fix it?" Thomas laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "You destroyed us. You mapped us for demolition. You think you can fix that?" "Yes," Claire said. She reached into the cab of the truck. Thomas flinched, realigning the sights on her chest. "Don't." "I'm getting a box, Thomas," she said calmly, not breaking eye contact. "If you're going to shoot me, do it. I'm dead anyway." She pulled out a heavy plastic file box, overflowing with papers and hard drives. She slammed it onto the hood of the truck. "This," she said, slapping the lid, "is Redstone. All of it. Not just the Mercer file. The Miller file. The collapsing of the San Juan aquifer. The bribery logs for the district judge." Thomas lowered the rifle an inch, his curiosity warring with his rage. "I hacked the mainframe," Claire said, the words spilling out fast now. "I downloaded the entire Project Red Rock directory before I resigned. I have the emails from Ashford, authorizing the forgery of your father's signature. I have the metadata proving the deed they showed you was created 3 weeks ago in Photoshop." She grabbed a handful of papers and held them up, shaking them in the wind. "Look at them. It's 17 families, Thomas. 17 ranches they stole, using the same lie. Lost deed. Old debt. They've been running this con for a decade." Thomas stared at the papers fluttering in her hand. He slowly lowered the rifle until it pointed at the dirt. He walked down the steps, wary, like approaching a trapped animal. He reached out and snatched the papers from her hand. He scanned them. His eyes widened. This is Ashford's email," Thomas muttered. "Manufacture legal justification. Use the debt leverage." "It's all there," Claire said. "Every dirty trick, every bribe." Thomas looked up at her. The suspicion hadn't left his eyes, but it had changed shape. "Why?" he asked. "Why bring this to us? You could have sold this. You could have disappeared." "I tried," Claire said. She slumped against the truck, her adrenaline fading, leaving her trembling. "I tried to be the person who could walk away. I sat in my apartment with a $250,000 bonus in my bank account and champagne on ice." She looked at Noah. "But I couldn't drink it," she whispered. "Why should we trust you?" Thomas asked, his voice hard again. "You lied to my son. You used his mother's memory to get inside. You were the enemy. You shouldn't trust me," Claire said. Her voice broke, cracking into jagged pieces. "I'm not asking for trust. I'm asking you to use me as a weapon. Because I'm the only one who can testify. The documents are good, but they need a witness. They need someone to stand up in court and say, 'I did it. I was the one who scouted the land. I was the one who planted the markers. I'm offering to destroy myself to save your home.'" "That doesn't answer the question," Thomas said quietly. Why? Claire closed her eyes. The desert wind whipped the loose strands of hair across her face. Because I killed her, she whispered. The silence on the ranch was absolute. Even the cicadas seemed to stop. What? Thomas asked. Claire opened her eyes. They were flooded now, raw and terrifyingly open. She looked directly at Noah. My daughter, she said. Emma, I told you she died in an accident. That was a lie. I mean, it was an accident, but it was my fault. She took a shuddering breath, her hands gripping the side mirror of the truck for support. We were in the car, Seattle. Just a Tuesday. She was 11. She was laughing at a dog in a raincoat. She wanted me to look. Claire's face contorted with the pain of the memory. But I was on the phone. With corporate. A yield projection call. I was so worried about the numbers. I didn't look at the road. I ran the light. Noah felt the tears running down his own face, hot and fast. He took a step down the stairs. A truck hit us, Claire sobbed. Broadside. She died instantly. I didn't even get to say goodbye, because I was too busy explaining a spreadsheet to a vice president. She looked at Thomas, her gaze pleading. For 4 years I've been running. I took these jobs because they kept me in the middle of nowhere, away from traffic lights, away from people. I turned myself into a machine, because machines don't feel pain. I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I just made enough money, I could bury the guilt. She gestured to the ranch, to the canyon, to Noah. But then I met him. I met your son, and he looked at me with her eyes. And he trusted me, and I realized I was doing it again. I was choosing the company over the child. I was driving the truck this time. She fell to her knees in the dust, her strength finally giving out. She covered her face with her hands. I can't bring her back, she wailed, the sound muffled by her palms. I can't save Emma, but I can't let them take this house. I can't let them take the place where you remember your wife. I have to do one good thing. Just one. Noah didn't wait for his father's permission. He ran down the steps. He hit the dust and wrapped his arms around Claire. She stiffened, then collapsed into him, clutching him tight, sobbing into his shoulder. Noah held her, smelling the dust and the stale coffee and the overwhelming grief. He cried for her. He cried for Emma. He cried for the unfairness of a world that broke people so thoroughly. It's okay, Noah whispered, rocking her slightly. It's okay. Thomas stood over them, the rifle hanging loose in his hand. He watched the woman who had betrayed them, weeping in the dirt with his son. He looked at the file box, the evidence that could save his grandfather's legacy. He looked at the horizon. The sun was setting, turning the cliffs to blood. Thomas Mercer was a hard man. The desert had made him hard. Grief had made him harder. But he was not a cruel man. He cleared his throat. It was a rough, gravelly sound. Get up, Thomas said. Claire pulled back from Noah, wiping her face with her dirty sleeve. She looked up at Thomas, expecting rejection. Thomas extended a hand. It hung there for a moment, a rough, calloused offering. Claire reached out and took it. Thomas pulled her to her feet with a single, strong motion. He didn't let go immediately. He held her gaze, searching for any last trace of deception. He found only wreckage. This doesn't make us friends, Thomas said, his voice low. You lied to my family. That doesn't wash off with a few tears. I know, Claire whispered. But, Thomas continued, looking at the box on the hood, if you can use that to stop them, if you can save my son's home, then you can stay. We fight together. Thank you, Claire breathed. Thomas, thank you. Don't thank me yet, Thomas said, releasing her hand and turning to scan the road. Because if you have that box, and if you downloaded what I think you downloaded, they aren't going to send lawyers next time. They're coming, Claire said, her voice steadying. I had to ditch my phone 50 miles back. I think they were tracking the signal. I saw SUVs, black ones. Private security. Webb, Noah said, the name tasting like acid. Webb, Claire confirmed. And he won't be coming to talk. Thomas looked at the rifle in his hand. Then he looked at the ranch house, the peeling paint, the porch swing, the life they had built. Let them come, Thomas said. This is Mercerland. We don't run. He picked up the heavy file box. Inside. Now. We have work to do. Noah, get the shutters. Lock the back gate. What about the truck? Noah asked. Leave it, Thomas said. Let them see it. Let them know the war has started. They moved into the house, a ragtag army of 3, a grieving father, a boy who had grown up too fast, and a corporate spy searching for redemption. Kodiak trotted behind them, pausing at the threshold to look back at the darkening road. The dog sniffed the wind. The scent of ozone and dust was changing. It smelled like a storm, a man-made storm. Inside the kitchen, Thomas slammed the box onto the table, right where the eviction notice had lain days before. He opened the lid. Okay, Thomas said, pulling out a sheaf of blueprints. Show me the weak spot. Show me where they're vulnerable. Claire stepped up to the table. She pointed a shaking finger at a geological survey map. Here, the water table permit. It's forged. If we can prove the signature is fake, the EPA shuts them down immediately. It's an automatic federal injunction. But we need to get this to the courthouse in Flagstaff before they file the demolition order on Tuesday. Tuesday is 2 days away, Noah said. Then we have 48 hours, Claire said, to build a case that usually takes a year. We can do it, Noah said. He looked at the USB drive still plugged into his computer in the corner. Because we have the one thing they don't. What's that? Claire asked. We know where the bodies are buried, Noah said. Grandpa's video. The safety deposit box made of stone. You said we needed the original deed to prove the forgery, right? Right, Claire said. But I don't know where it is. The coordinates were cryptic. I know where it is, Noah said. He walked to the computer and pulled up the topographical map he had been studying. He pointed to a spot deep in the Narrows, far off the trail, Sector 4 Alpha, the place where the river cuts under the cliff. Grandpa called it the Cathedral. Claire looked at the map, then at Noah. A spark of hope ignited in her eyes. If the original deed is there, proving he never sold the rights, then Redstone has nothing, Thomas finished. And they go to jail. A heavy thud echoed from the roof. They all froze. It wasn't wind. It was the heavy, rhythmic THWUP of rotors. Helicopter, Thomas hissed. Lights out. Noah scrambled to hit the switch. The kitchen plunged into darkness. Through the window, a brilliant beam of white light sliced through the yard, illuminating the dust, the barn, and Claire's truck like a stage spotlight. The phone on the wall, the old landline, rang. Ring, ring. Thomas stared at it. No one called the landline. Only telemarketers, and he picked it up. Hello. Evening, Mr. Mercer. The voice of Victor Ashford purred, smooth and distorted by the connection. I believe you have something that belongs to me. A very confused employee, and a box of proprietary data. I have a witness, Thomas said cold, and enough evidence to put you away for life. That's adorable, Ashford chuckled. Thomas, look out the window. Thomas looked. The helicopter spotlight widened. At the end of the driveway, headlights appeared. 2 sets, then 4, then 6. A convoy of black SUVs was rolling toward the gate. I'm not sending lawyers this time, Thomas, Ashford said. I'm sending a cleaning crew. Send Miss Donnelly out with the drive and we leave you alone. Keep her. And well, accidents happen in the desert. Gas leaks, for example. Terrible tragedies. Thomas gripped the phone until plastic creaked. Come and take it, Thomas whispered. He hung up. He looked at Claire and Noah in the dark. The searchlight swept across their faces, blinding them for a second. They're here, Thomas said. Get down. As the Mercer family hit the floor, the front window shattered inward, raining glass over the very spot where they had been standing. A canister skittered across the floorboards, hissing violently. It wasn't a bullet, it was tear gas. But as the white smoke began to fill the room, choking them, Noah saw something else through the broken window. Kodiak wasn't inside with them. The dog was outside, in the dark, moving through the shadows of the barn. And he wasn't alone. From the surrounding hills, a chorus of howls erupted. Not dogs, but coyotes. Dozens of them. The canyon was answering the invasion, and the Redstone mercenaries were about to learn that in the dark, technology is no match for teeth. The breaking of the dam did not sound like water. It sounded like a printer in a dusty law office in Flagstaff, churning out pages of affidavits at 3 in the morning. It sounded like the ping of an email hitting the inbox of the Arizona Attorney General. And, 3 days after the siege at the Mercer Ranch, it sounded like the voice of a news anchor on the small television set in Thomas Mercer's living room. Breaking news tonight regarding the Redstone Mining Corporation. A massive data leak, allegedly provided by a former senior analyst, has exposed a decade-long scheme of land fraud, predatory litigation, and environmental negligence across 3 counties. The documents, which were authenticated late yesterday by state investigators, appear to show a systemic pattern of falsifying geological surveys to seize private property. Noah sat on the floor, his arms wrapped around his knees. The living room window was boarded up with plywood, a scar from the tear gas canister that had smashed through it 3 nights ago. The smell of the acrid smoke still lingered in the curtains, faint but stinging, a reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. Claire Donnelly sat on the sofa. She wasn't wearing the corporate silk anymore, nor the panic of the fugitive. She wore clean jeans, and one of Thomas's spare work shirts, the sleeves rolled up. She held a mug of coffee with both hands, staring at the screen where her own name flashed in the chyron, whistleblower identified. They're using my photo, Claire said softly. It was her LinkedIn headshot, polished, smiling, a stranger. She looks like she knows what she's doing. She did, Thomas said. He was standing by the fireplace, cleaning the rifle. He hadn't put it down in 72 hours. She took down a giant. I took down the wall, Claire corrected, taking a sip of coffee. The giant is still standing, and he's angry. The previous 3 days had been a blur of adrenaline and terror. The tear gas attack had been thwarted not by the police, but by the canyon itself. The pack of coyotes that had erupted from the darkness, drawn by Kodiak's call, had spooked the mercenaries' flank. In the confusion, flashing lights had appeared on the highway, Sheriff Miller, finally responding to the calls from the tribal council. The mercenaries had scattered like roaches into the dark, leaving behind only tire tracks and the chemical burn in the air. But they hadn't left the state. Noah looked at Claire. Does this mean they stop? The news said the Attorney General is investigating. It means they're cornered, Claire said, turning to him. Her face was calm, but her hands were trembling slightly against the ceramic mug. And cornered animals bite. Ashford knows he's going to prison if this sticks. He has one move left, intimidation. If he can scare us into recanting, or claiming the data was doctored, he might wiggle out. He's not scaring anyone, Thomas said, snapping the bolt of the rifle back into place. Not anymore. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose sheet of plywood over the window. Kodiak, who had been sleeping fitfully by the door, lifted his head, his ears swiveling like radar dishes. He stood up slowly. A low rumble started in his chest. Noah felt the familiar cold prickle on his neck. Dad. Thomas was already moving to the window, peering through the crack in the plywood. Here we go. Police? Claire asked, setting her mug down. No, Thomas said, his voice dropping to the combat register. Black SUVs. 3 of them, coming fast. The storm had arrived. They didn't bother with the pretense of a doorbell. The vehicles skidded to a halt in the yard, kicking up a wall of red dust that coated the porch. Doors flew open. Marcus Webb stepped out first. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was wearing tactical gear, black cargo pants, boots, a tight black t-shirt that showed the slabs of muscle on his arms. He wasn't carrying a briefcase. He was carrying a baseball bat. Behind him, 6 other men fanned out. They were big, faceless enforcement types, the kind Redstone kept on payroll for labor disputes. Stay inside, Thomas ordered. He unlocked the front door and stepped out onto the porch, the rifle leveled at Webb's chest. That's far enough, Thomas barked. Webb didn't stop. He walked to the bottom of the steps, swinging the bat loosely in his hand. He looked up at Thomas with eyes that were bloodshot and manic. This wasn't business anymore. This was personal. His boss was going down, his stock options were worthless, and he was looking at an indictment. He wanted to hurt someone. Put the gun down, old man, Webb rasped. You shoot me, you go away for murder. You think a jury will believe self-defense when I'm just standing in your yard? I think a jury will give me a medal, Thomas said, his finger tight on the trigger. Get off my land. It's not your land, Webb spat. It's a crime scene. We're here to recover stolen corporate property. The hard drives. The files. Hand them over, and we don't burn this shack to the ground with you inside. I already sent them. Claire's voice rang out. She pushed past Thomas, stepping onto the porch. She stood next to the rancher, unarmed, small against the backdrop of the armed men, but she stood tall. The FBI has copies, Claire shouted, her voice shaking but loud. The EPA has copies. The Arizona Republic has copies. You can burn the house, Marcus, but you can't burn the cloud. It's over. Webb's eyes snapped to her. The hatred in his face was a physical thing. You traitorous bitch. You think you're a hero? You're nothing. You're a liability. And liabilities get liquidated. Noah, call the sheriff, Thomas said out of the side of his mouth, never taking his eyes off Webb. Now, Noah was already on the phone, huddled in the doorway, peering through the screen. I'm trying. It's busy. The lines are jammed. Signal jammer, Claire realized. They brought another one. Webb took a step up the stairs. Last chance. Give me the drives. No, Thomas said. Webb signaled. The 6 men behind him surged forward. 2 of them pulled crowbars from their belts. Take the house, Webb screamed. Thomas fired. The shot was deafening. He didn't aim for the men. He fired into the dirt at Webb's feet. A geyser of red dust exploded, peppering Webb's legs. Webb flinched, jumping back, but he didn't run. He fired. Get him! The men rushed the porch. Kodiak! Noah screamed. The German shepherd exploded through the screen door. He didn't bark. There was no warning this time. He was a 90-pound missile of copper and black fury. He launched himself off the top step, sailing over Thomas's shoulder, and collided with the first mercenary in midair. The man went down with a scream as Kodiak's jaws locked onto his forearm. The bone crunched audibly. Kodiak didn't stay there. He released, spun, and snapped at the second man, tearing through the tactical pants and sinking teeth into the thigh. The porch became a chaotic brawl. Thomas was using the rifle as a club, swinging the stock into the chest of a man trying to climb the railing. Claire was throwing potted plants, anything she could reach, screaming in rage. But Webb ignored the dog. He ignored Thomas. He saw the weak point. He saw Noah standing in the open doorway, frozen in horror. Webb lunged. He vaulted the railing, bypassing the melee, and grabbed Noah by the front of his shirt. He yanked the boy out onto the porch, spinning him around and putting the baseball bat across Noah's throat, pulling him back against his chest as a human shield. "Stop!" Webb screamed. "Drop the gun or I crush his windpipe." The freezing of time was instant. Thomas froze, the rifle raised to strike. His face went white. Claire gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The mercenaries backed off, bleeding and bruised. Webb breathed heavily, the sweat dripping from his face onto Noah's hair. Noah clawed at the bat, pressing against his throat, choking, his feet scrabbling for purchase. "You lose, Mercer," Webb hissed. "Now, put the gun down and kick it to me." Thomas slowly lowered the rifle. His eyes were locked on Noah's terrified face. "Don't hurt him. He's a child. He's leverage," Webb said. "Kick the gun." Thomas bent his knees to set the rifle down. A low, vibrating sound filled the silence. Webb looked down. Kodiak was standing 5 feet away. The dog was bleeding from a cut above his eye, where a crowbar had grazed him. His fur was matted with dust. But he wasn't looking at the other men. He was looking at Webb, and for the first time, Noah saw the wolf, the ancient, primal ancestor that lived inside the pet. Kodiak's eyes were dilated, black pools of violence. "Call off the dog," Webb warned, tightening the bat against Noah's neck. Noah gagged. "Kodiak," Thomas started, his voice trembling. But Kodiak wasn't listening to Thomas. He was looking at Noah. He saw the bat. He saw the fear. Webb made a mistake. He shifted his weight, preparing to drag Noah backward. Kodiak moved faster than thought. He didn't go for the leg. He didn't go for the arm. He launched himself vertically, straight at Webb's face. Webb screamed and threw his arm up to protect his eyes, instinctively loosening his grip on the bat. Noah dropped to the floor, scrambling away on hands and knees. Kodiak hit Webb with the force of a cannonball. The man and the dog went over the railing, crashing into the rose bushes below. There was a snarl, a shout, and the sickening sound of tearing fabric and flesh. "Noah!" Claire screamed, diving for him, covering his body with hers. Thomas raised the rifle again, but he didn't need to fire. From the bushes, Webb scrambled out, crawling on his back, kicking frantically. "Get him off! Get him off me!" Kodiak was on top of him, holding him down by the tactical vest, snarling inches from his face. The dog wasn't mauling him blindly. He was pinning him, dominating him. Every time Webb tried to reach for a weapon, Kodiak snapped his jaws shut inches from the man's nose, a terrifying promise of what would happen if he moved. Then, sirens, real ones. A lot of them. Sheriff Miller's cruiser drifted around the corner, followed by 2 state trooper SUVs. They tore through the open gate, lights flashing blue and red, blinding in the dust. "Drop the weapons!" The sheriff's voice boomed over the PA. Everyone on the ground. The mercenaries dropped their crowbars. They knew when the game was over. Webb lay in the dirt, sobbing, with Kodiak standing over him, panting, blood dripping from the dog's snout. Not his own. "Get the dog," the sheriff yelled, stepping out with his service weapon drawn. "Kodiak," Noah yelled, his voice cracking. "Here." Kodiak looked at Webb one last time, let out a final, disgusted snort, and trotted back to the porch. He sat down next to Noah, leaned his heavy weight against the boy's shaking leg, and began to calmly lick the blood off his paw. It was over. The following week was not a calm after the storm. It was a different kind of storm. It was a storm of paper, microphones, and vindication. The sheriff's arrival had been just the beginning. The story Claire had leaked was too big to suppress. By the next morning, news vans were parked 3 deep along the fence line of the Mercer Ranch. The state investigation launched within 48 hours. The governor, sensing the political toxicity of Redstone, publicly denounced the company. The safety protocols Claire had exposed, the deliberate weakening of the gas lines, the jamming of signals, elevated the case from fraud to domestic terrorism. Noah watched it all from the sidelines. He watched his father, usually so quiet, stand before a bank of microphones with Sam Begay from the tribal council. "This isn't just about my land," Thomas told the cameras, his voice steady. "It's about a company that thought they could treat people like dirt just because they had money. They forgot that dirt is what buries you." Other families came forward. The Millers, who had been living in a trailer, filed a joinder lawsuit. 17 families, empowered by the Mercer stand, formed a class action suit that the media dubbed the Canyon Coalition. Environmental groups descended on the Narrows. They found the sensors Claire had talked about. They found the boreholes. They confirmed that mining the river would have poisoned the water for 3 states. But amidst the victory, there was a cost. Claire Donnelly sat in the sheriff's office in Flagstaff. Noah and Thomas sat on the bench outside the interrogation room. The door opened. Claire walked out. She wasn't in cuffs, but she looked drained. A lawyer, a public defender, walked beside her. "They're charging me," Claire said simply, stopping in front of them. "Felony corporate espionage. Fraud. Trespassing. But you saved us," Noah said, standing up. "You stopped them. Doesn't that count?" "It counts for the plea deal," the lawyer said wearily. "But she still stole data. She still trespassed. The law is blunt, son." "It's okay, Noah," Claire said. She managed a weak smile. "I knew this was coming. I'm looking at probation. Maybe a year, heavy fines. I'll never work in the industry again." "You lost everything," Thomas said quietly. "No," Claire said. She looked at Noah, then at the file in her hand. The settlement offer Redstone had been forced to expedite to stop the bleeding. "I lost my career. I lost my money. But I didn't lose myself." She handed the file to Thomas. "They're settling," she said. "Full debt forgiveness for the Mercer Ranch, restoration of the deed, and a payout for damages. It's enough to fix the barn, Thomas. Enough to pay off the medical bills. Enough for Noah's college." Thomas took the file. He didn't look at the numbers. He looked at Claire. "You should have kept some of that bonus," Thomas said dryly. "Blood money," Claire shrugged. "I don't want it." The climax of the legal war came 10 days later. It wasn't a shootout. It was a press conference. Noah sat in the living room, Kodiak at his feet. The plywood was gone from the window, replaced by new glass. The air conditioner hummed. On the TV, Victor Ashford was being led out of his penthouse in handcuffs. The polished CEO looked disheveled, shouting at the cameras about conspiracies. Beside him, Marcus Webb was being loaded into a separate van, his face still bandaged where Kodiak had made his point. Redstone's CEO arrested on racketeering charges. Noah felt a weight lift off his chest that he hadn't realized he was carrying. It was the weight of helplessness. "We won," Noah whispered. Kodiak thumped his tail on the floor. Thomas walked in from the kitchen. He was holding 2 glasses of lemonade. He handed one to Noah. "We didn't just win," Thomas said. "We survived." He sat down in his armchair. He looked younger. The lines of stress around his eyes had softened. "Claire is coming over for dinner," Thomas said casually, "to celebrate the plea deal being finalized. No jail time, just community service and restitution." "Community service?" Noah asked. "Apparently," Thomas took a sip of lemonade, hiding a small smile. "The judge thinks helping a local rancher repair his fences and catalog geological samples counts as service to the community." Noah grinned. "She's staying?" "She's staying nearby," Thomas said. "Renting the guest cottage at the Miller place. She says she likes the view." That evening, the sun set over the Red Rock Canyon in a blaze of glory, turning the sandstone to gold. The air was cool, smelling of sage and victory. They sat on the porch, Noah, Thomas, and Claire. Claire was still wearing her hiking boots, but she looked lighter, as if she had set down a heavy pack she had been carrying for 4 years. Kodiak lay between them. He had finally accepted Claire. He rested his chin on her boot, his eyes closed in contentment. "So," Claire said, looking out at the vast expanse of the canyon. "What now? The bad guys are in jail. The land is safe. What does a whistleblower do with the rest of her life?" "You could write a book," Noah suggested. "About the geology. The real geology." "Maybe," Claire smiled. "Or maybe I just take pictures. Real ones. No hidden agendas. I could use a hand with the harvest next month," Thomas offered, looking at his hands. "If the community service hours need filling." "I think I can manage that," Claire said softly. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. Orion. Cassiopeia. The map that never changed. Noah looked at them, his father, the woman who had saved them, and the dog who had protected them all. He realized that the hole in his life left by his mother wasn't filled. It never would be. But edges were softer now. He wasn't alone in the canyon anymore. "Hey," Noah said, sitting up. "Do you hear that?" "Hear what?" Thomas asked. "The wind," Noah said. "It sounds different in the Narrows tonight." "It's just wind, Noah," Claire said. "No," Noah insisted. He stood up and walked to the railing. Kodiak stood up with him, his ears pricked forward, listening intently to the deep, echoing silence of the ravine. "It sounds like singing," Noah whispered. Thomas stood up and joined him. The wind plays tricks in the rocks, son. Grandpa said the canyon speaks when justice is done, Noah said. He said the rocks remember. Kodiak let out a soft whine, staring toward the spot where the original deed had been hidden. The spot they had never actually had to visit because the digital evidence had been enough. The secret safety deposit box of Elias Mercer. We never went there, Noah realized. We never went to the cathedral. We didn't need to, Claire said. We won. But what if there's something else? Noah asked, turning to them. Grandpa didn't just hide a deed. In the video, he said he hid the future. Thomas looked at Claire. Claire looked at Thomas. The mystery of the old man hadn't been fully solved. They had won the war, but the treasure hunt wasn't over. Maybe one last hike? Claire suggested, a spark of adventure returning to her eyes. For old time's sake. Tomorrow, Thomas said, putting a hand on Noah's shoulder. Tomorrow we go see what the old man left us. As the family retreated inside for the night, safe at last, the camera pans back out to the canyon, drifting down into the deep, twisting labyrinth of the Narrows. It moves through the darkness, past the place where Noah rescued Claire, past the rushing river, deep into the hidden grotto known as the cathedral. There, untouched by the corporate war, sits a small, rusted metal box wedged into a crevice. But the box isn't sealed. It has been pried open, recently. And lying in the dust beside it is not a deed, but a map. A map that doesn't show minerals, but something far older and far more valuable. Someone else has been here, and they didn't take the treasure. They left it. The Arizona autumn did not arrive with a whisper. It arrived with a shift in the light. The brutal, bleaching white of the summer sun softened into a rich, heavy gold that poured over the canyon walls like honey. The air, once a physical assault of heat, now carried a sharp, crystalline edge in the mornings, smelling of drying sage, pinon wood smoke, and the dusty, ancient scent of cooling stone. 6 months had passed since the siege at the Mercer Ranch. To the land, 6 months was nothing, a blink of an eye in a geologic timeline that measured history in millions of years. But to the boy, the man, and the dog living in the shadow of the red cliffs, 6 months was a lifetime. Noah Mercer sat on the top rail of the corral fence, his heels hooked over the wood. He was 13 now. The year had stretched him. He was taller, his shoulders broadening under his t-shirt, the baby fat completely gone from his face. But the change wasn't just physical. There was a quietness in him that hadn't been there before. It wasn't the silence of loneliness that had defined him after his mother died. It was the watchful, settled silence of a boy who had seen the worst the world could offer: greed, betrayal, violence, and had stood his ground. He looked less like a child waiting for permission and more like a young man who knew his place on the earth. Below him, in the garden, a new stone marker sat amidst the dying tomato vines and the hardy rosemary bushes. It wasn't a grave. There was no body beneath it, but it was a place of anchoring. It was a simple block of local sandstone, smoothed by Thomas's own hands. Carved into the face were 2 words and a phrase: Emma Donnelly. She would want justice. Noah looked at the stone. They had put it there for Claire, but they had also put it there for themselves. It was a reminder that the war they had fought wasn't just about property lines or mineral rights. It was about the cost of looking away. The ranch was quiet. The ominous hum of drones was gone. The black SUVs with tinted windows were a memory, replaced by the mundane rattle of the UPS truck and the occasional lowing of the cattle. The legal storm had broken, flooded the valley with paperwork and headlines, and then receded, leaving the ground clean. Redstone mining was crippled. Victor Ashford was awaiting trial in federal holding. The Canyon Coalition lawsuit had resulted in a landmark settlement that not only cleared the Mercer family's crushing medical debt, but established a permanent conservation easement over the Narrows. The land could never be mined. It belonged to the Hawks, the Coyotes, and the Silence. "She's late," Thomas Mercer said. Noah turned. His father was standing on the porch, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Thomas looked different, too. The perpetual furrow between his brows had smoothed out. He moved with the easy, loose-limbed gait of a man who owned his day, rather than a man being hunted by it. He wore a clean shirt, and his beard was trimmed. "She's not late," Noah said, checking the position of the sun. "She said afternoon. It's barely 2. "Coffee gets cold," Thomas muttered, but there was no bite in it. He set the mugs on the railing and leaned back, eyes scanning the long dust road. Kodiak was lying in the dust at the bottom of the steps. The German Shepherd had healed from the fight with Webb, but he carried a new scar, a thin, white line of hairless skin above his right eye, a badge of honor from the crowbar that had tried to break him. He didn't sleep as deeply as he used to. One ear was always swiveled toward the gate. He was the guardian of the peace now, the keeper of the perimeter. Then, the sound came. It wasn't the sleek purr of a corporate rental. It was a chugging, rhythmic rattle, a diesel engine that had seen better decades. Kodiak lifted his head. He tasted the air. He didn't growl. His tail gave a single, slow thump against the dust. A truck crested the rise. It was a Ford F-250, older than Noah, painted a faded matte white with the logo of the Environmental Protection Agency stenciled on the door. It was covered in mud, the wheel wells caked with the gray clay of the northern plateau. It had a rack on the top loaded with gearboxes and a spare tire that looked like it had been used recently. "That's a work truck," Thomas noted, a hint of approval in his voice. The truck pulled up to the gate and stopped. The engine shuddered and died. The door opened, and Claire Donnelly stepped out. Noah felt his chest tighten, a reflex of old pain mixed with new hope. She looked real. The polished corporate strategist with the silk blouses and the expensive haircut was gone, erased completely. The woman standing by the truck wore heavy canvas pants that were stained at the knees, a gray flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up to her elbows, and boots that were scuffed to the leather. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, streaked with a few new strands of gray that she hadn't bothered to dye. Her skin was tanned, weathered by wind and sun, and there were fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 6 months ago. She didn't look like money anymore. She looked like the canyon. She walked toward the porch, carrying a cardboard box of vegetables. She walked with a slight limp. The ankle would never be perfect, but she didn't hide it. She walked straight. "Afternoon," she called out. Her voice was raspier, tired but clear. "Afternoon," Thomas said. He picked up the second mug of coffee. Black. 2 sugars. "Just how you didn't ask for it last time." Claire smiled. It was a small, hesitant smile, but it reached her eyes. "You remembered." "I remember a lot of things," Thomas said, walking down the steps to meet her. He didn't hug her. Thomas wasn't a hugger, but he handed her the mug with a deliberate gentleness. "Good to see you, Claire." "Good to be seen," she said, taking the warmth into her hands. She looked up at Noah on the fence. "Hey, hero." "Hey," Noah said, jumping down. He landed in the dust and walked over. He wanted to hug her, but he felt the shift in the air. They weren't in crisis mode anymore. They had to learn how to be normal. "Cool truck." "It's a beast," Claire laughed, patting the hood. "Needs a quart of oil every 300 miles, but it climbs walls. It's my official EPA field vehicle. I'm assigned to the remediation team for the San Juan Basin." "Cleaning up the mess?" Noah asked. "One toxic site at a time," Claire said. "It's not glamorous. I spend half my day arguing with contractors and the other half standing in toxic sludge. But," she took a deep breath of the ranch air, "I sleep at night. For the first time in years, I sleep." She put the box of vegetables on the porch. "From the community garden in Flagstaff. I figured I owed you some produce since I ate all your stew." Then, the moment settled. The chatter died away. Kodiak stood up. He hadn't moved toward her yet. He stood 10 feet away, his amber eyes locked on her face. He was the final judge. The court of law had cleared her. The family had forgiven her. But the dog operated on a frequency that didn't care about paperwork or apologies. He cared about the soul. Claire went still. She lowered the coffee mug. She didn't call him. She didn't hold out her hand for a sniff. She just stood there, letting him read her. She offered herself up to his inspection with total vulnerability. Kodiak lowered his head. He took a step forward. Then another. His movements were fluid, devoid of the tension that had defined their early interactions. He walked up to her, his nose working, inhaling the scent of her boots, her pants, her hands. He smelled the EPA dust. He smelled the hard work. He smelled the absence of the lie. He smelled the grief that she still carried for Emma. But it wasn't a toxic secret anymore. It was a clean wound, healing in the open air. Kodiak let out a soft exhale, a sound like a balloon deflating. He stepped closer and pressed his heavy side against her legs, leaning his full weight into her. He looked up at her, his tongue lolling out in a goofy, relaxed grin. "You're pack," he said. "You're clear." Claire let out a sob. Just one, a quick, sharp intake of breath. She reached down and buried her hand in his copper fur, scratching him behind the scarred ear. "Hi, buddy," she whispered. "Thank you." Noah felt a lump in his throat. "He knows," Noah said. "He always knows." "He knows you've earned it," Thomas added softly. "Come on inside. Dinner's not going to cook itself, and unless you want Noah's venison jerky again, I picked up some steaks." The evening drifted in with the purple twilight. They sat around the kitchen table, the same table where the eviction notice had sat, where the deception had unraveled. But tonight, it was just a table. The ghosts had been exorcised by the smell of grilled meat and the sound of laughter. They ate with the hunger of people who had spent too long surviving on adrenaline. They talked about small things. Claire talked about her apartment in Flagstaff, a small studio with a view of the peaks, nothing like the glass tower in Phoenix. She talked about her probation officer, a stern woman who secretly loved rock collecting, which Claire found hilarious. She checks my mileage logs like a hawk, Claire said, cutting a piece of steak. But then she asks me if I found any good quartz samples. We found a geode in the North Wash last week, Noah said. Size of a basketball. You should see it. I'd love to, Claire said. She paused, looking at her plate. I'm supposed to be in this sector once a month for water table testing. Part of the settlement compliance. Once a month, Thomas repeated. He was watching her. Yeah, Claire said. I can stay at the motel in town. But I figured I'd stop by to check the sensors. Noah looked at his dad. He saw the hesitation in Thomas's eyes. Not suspicion, but the cautiousness of a man who had forgotten how to open the door. You could visit, Noah said, bridging the gap. More than once a month. The geode isn't going anywhere. And I need someone to check my photography. I've been practicing with the aperture settings you showed me. Claire looked at Noah, her eyes shining. I'd like that, Noah. I'd like that a lot. Thomas cleared his throat. He picked up his glass. The boy's right. It's a long drive to town. The guest room, well, the door is fixed. And Kodiak doesn't guard it anymore. If you wanted, it wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't a cinematic romance. It was something sturdier. It was the quiet, creaking sound of a bridge being lowered. I'd like that, Thomas, Claire said softly. If you wanted, I think we could tolerate it, Thomas said, a small smile touching the corner of his mouth beneath his beard. After dinner, they moved to the porch. It was the ritual now. The house was for living, but the porch was for understanding. The night was vast. The Milky Way was a river of crushed diamond arching over the canyon, so bright it felt like you could reach up and drag your fingers through it. The silence of the desert was profound, a living presence that wrapped around them. Noah sat on the swing, pushing it gently with his toe. Claire sat in the rocking chair. Thomas leaned against the railing, smoking his pipe, the sweet tobacco smoke drifting into the night. Kodiak lay in the center of the group, his body touching everyone's feet at once. A paw on Noah's boot, a tail brushing Claire's leg, his back near Thomas. He was the hub of the wheel. Mom loved nights like this, Noah said. It was the first time he had spoken of her, without the sharp pang of loss. It felt more like a warm memory now. She used to say the stars were the only things that never lied. She was right, Claire said, looking up. They're constant. We're the ones who spin around. I used to think. Noah started, then stopped. He looked at the dog. I used to think being good meant you just helped people. Like Mom did. She helped everyone. She never saw the bad in anyone. Thomas turned his head to listen. But Kodiak taught me something else, Noah continued, his voice gaining strength. He taught me that you can't just help. You have to protect too. You have to have teeth. If you don't have teeth, the wolves eat you. Mom was all love. But Kodiak, he's love and iron. Claire reached out and touched Noah's arm. You needed both, Noah. You needed her soft heart to save me from the river. And you needed his iron to save us from the company. You are the balance. We're all broken bits, Thomas murmured, looking at the smoke curl from his pipe. Just glued back together a little funny. Gold, Claire said. What? Thomas asked. Kintsugi, Claire said, her eyes fixed on the stars. It's a Japanese art. When a bowl breaks, they don't throw it away. They fix it with gold lacquer. They make the cracks visible. They say the piece is more beautiful for having been broken. She looked at Thomas, then at Noah. We're not just glued back together, she said. We're mended with gold. We're stronger at the broken places. Noah looked at his father. He saw the gray in his beard, the lines of worry that were fading but still there. He looked at Claire, at the scars on her hands, and the sadness that still lived deep in her hazel eyes so much like Emma's and so much like his own. He realized then that family wasn't just blood. Blood was biology. Family was a choice. It was the people who stood next to you when the tear gas came through the window. It was the people who drove 4 hours in a beat-up truck just to bring you vegetables. It was the people who saw your ugly parts, your grief, your debt, your rage, and stayed anyway. I like that, Noah said. Gold. Kodiak lifted his head and let out a long, contented sigh, closing his eyes as the cool wind ruffled his fur. Noah looked out at the canyon. The darkness hid the narrows, the river, and the scars of the past. But he knew they were there. He knew about the safety deposit box deep in the cathedral that they still hadn't opened, the map his grandfather had left. That was for tomorrow. That was for the next adventure. For tonight, this was enough. Noah watched the sunset fade completely, leaving them in the starlight. Sometimes the people we save end up saving us, Noah thought, the voice inside his head sounding older, like the echo of the canyon itself. And sometimes the ones who hurt us teach us how to heal. We thought Claire was the storm, but she was just the rain that washed the dust away. God doesn't send us perfect people. He sends us broken ones, because they know how to fight for the light. And dogs are the only ones who see it all clearly from the start. Kodiak knew. He knew that loyalty isn't blind trust. It's seeing the flaw and choosing to stand guard anyway. It's getting cold, Thomas said, tapping his pipe out on the railing. We should head in. 1 more minute, Claire said. I just want to watch Orion rise. Okay, Thomas said. 1 more minute. They stayed there for an hour, 3 humans and 1 dog, watching the universe wheel overhead, anchored to the earth by gravity and to each other by grace. The desert wind whispered through the sagebrush, a sound like a breath being released. It carried the promise of winter, the memory of summer, and the absolute, unshakable truth that the land remembers everything. And in the end, justice is just another word for balance restored. Noah closed his eyes and listened. The canyon was singing, and for the first time in a long time, the song wasn't a dirge. It was a lullaby. As the lights in the ranch house finally flickered out, leaving the canyon in darkness, the silence seemed absolute. But deep in the labyrinth of the Narrows, inside the hidden grotto known as the cathedral, a single beam of moonlight struck the rusted metal box the family had yet to retrieve. The lid, which had been pried open by an unknown hand weeks ago, shifted slightly in the draft. Inside, the map lay waiting, not a map of minerals, but a map of the ancestral road. And in the corner of the grotto, barely visible in the shadows, fresh boot prints marked the dust. They were too small to be a man's, and too light to be a soldier's. Someone else was hunting for Elias Mercer's secret, and they were already ahead of Noah. Noah and Claire just risked everything to save their home from being erased. They are sitting on that porch right now, waiting for the next storm to hit. Don't leave them alone in the dark. Subscribe to Stand Watch with the Mercer family. Like this video to show Redstone Mining that we are watching them. And comment below, who do you think opened the grandfather's box? If you leave now, you're leaving the story unfinished.